Dianne Feinstein is 89 years old.
Wow.
And she needs to decide whether or not she's going to run for re-election for a 6-year term to the U.S. Senate.
Oh, my goodness. She's considering it?
The fact that she's considering it just makes you roll your eyes because it's like why?
Why? That's exactly what I was thinking. Why? What's up, guys? I'm here to tell you this episode is brought to you by Crowd Health. Crowd Health is a new, fast-growing, tech-enabled, well-capitalized, community-powered alternative to traditional health insurance. Founded by Andy Schoonover, a proven founder and entrepreneur with a successful track record, including a $100 million plus exit. By the way, Andy's been on this podcast in the past. Crowd Health uses the power of crowdfunding, member ratings, unlimited choice, and huge cash pay discounts to provide a simple, considerably less expensive solution to managing your medical bills. Crowd Health gives you full agency and sticks with you no matter where you move or what jobs you take on. You've heard of Big Pharma, but you may not know Big Insurance is actually the man behind the curtain. With 12 of the last 15 heads of the FDA taking jobs in Big Pharma and 64% of its funding coming from private industry, don't hold your breath waiting for the government to save the day. It's safe to say our system's broken. It's time to take your well-being into your own hands, and Crowd Health helps you do just that. You'll pay into your individual account monthly, and if you ever want to leave, you'll simply pay a $250 closing fee, and they will return the entire balance in your account to you because it's your account. Because it's crowdfunded, we all have a vested interest in each other's health. They even cover up to $300 a year in routine wellness visits. So far, for every $100 members have paid into their accounts, an average of only $30 has been paid out. So you can expect to see your money grow in your account over time. Take that, Big Insurance. Join today by visiting joincrowdhealth.com and using the promo code KLP to pay only $99 a month for the first 3 months. That's joincrowdhealth.com, promo code KLP. Joincrowdhealth.com. Get you some. All right, so Lee, I wanted to have you on to discuss politics tonight. Like a guilty pleasure, I feel like it's a guilty pleasure because I don't know that much about it, but it's one of those things that's kind of fun to like talk about because it seems like everyone's talking about it now. Yeah, well, it's almost like a pastime.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for taking the time. And but I think it is would you agree that it is an area where it has diminishing returns because it's good to be involved and yet there's like limits to your ability to really like impact. And if you like spend hours and hours and hours and hours obsessing over everything, like, does that really make a difference? You know, like, would you agree that it could have some diminishing returns for people like go down the rabbit holes like way too often? Like it becomes like entertainment almost. Yeah. Politics like becomes like entertainment if you get like too sucked into it. I don't know. Would you agree with that or disagree with that? Just pull that closer. There you go. Right up to you.
As someone who spent the last, 5 years or so working in politics, I feel a little burnt out, and I suspect that lots of people feel that way too. Mm-hmm. It's the kind of thing where like you show up, you give it your all, and you're so hyper focused on that win that you do everything you can kind of to achieve that goal. Mm-hmm. It causes a lot of people to burn out and then leave. And so, we stand up these political campaigns with all sorts of talented people. They give it everything they got for a couple of years, and then they leave politics as a career. And so that's actually part of what we started Arena to combat was this like churn of people through the political space. You get a lot of people who come in who kind of want to make their impact, but then they get burnt out, they get tired. They leave and they go do something. Maybe they become a consultant because that's a little bit because that's the easy, that's the easier thing to do.
So I did not know that burnout was popular in politics. I could see if I stop for a second and think about it, I could see why. I think I just hadn't heard that before.
Yeah, I mean, I think it gets at to the question you were just asking. Like people, people are all in, and that's what happens when you go all in on something.
Yes, and to be clear, when I think about diminishing returns, I'm not thinking about activists. I'm not thinking about people who are in politics. I'm thinking about people like myself, because It's interesting. There's something about the politics that's interesting. Like it's in the news and various people are talking about. Lots of people are talking about. You can go on YouTube and find all these different perspectives, and it gets like heated and escalated, and it's like shock value.
Yeah.
But for me, I wouldn't be able to justify like really spending a ton of time on it. At least this is how I feel, because at the end of the day, like, it's going to inform my perspective on something, and I might vote a certain way or not, and that's about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like just to obsess over it and spend way too much time on it for like the role that I'm in life, I feel like I can't really justify it. Even though sometimes I want to, it's like, okay, that's enough of time here on that. Because there is like an entertainment value to it for some reason.
Yeah.
But anyhow, I wanted to have you on to get your perspective on things because, like I was saying before we press go here, so I don't know if you know this, but I grew up in a very small town in upstate New York, and the way I grew up, we weren't supposed to vote actually, so we were not supposed to get like politically involved, and then there was a decade and a half or so where I was just head down building companies, and I didn't feel like I had any time, didn't want to take any time. I was not politically interested at all. It just didn't seem like relevant it didn't seem mission critical. And when you're building companies, you need to like focus on what's mission critical. Right. And then Trump got elected in 2016, and I'll bet you it was like halfway through that. I bet it wasn't until like 2018 where I started to like pay somewhat attention, like, oh, this was kind of a big deal. Like this was a different one, but I just wasn't really in on like even that election so much. And then 2019 and 2020, like the 2020 election just felt like it got so heated, and the season I was in life, I had more time and attention. I started to get a little bit more like involved and follow along. And one of the things that it seems to me is it's gotten so divisive where it's not now I have this opinion and that person has that opinion and we can talk about these things, but it's actually like they're evil, right. Both sides are like this, we can't have this. Like it's gotten so, it's like an ultimatum on each side.
Mm-hmm. Zero sum in some ways.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so then I was hearing this, and like I was saying, I tend to hear the voices from the right loudest in my life for whatever reason, the context in my upbringing, whatever. And one of the things that I was hearing a lot of was, this 2020 election really, really matters. It matters so much. Everything's on the line. Everything's at stake. And, God forbid the Biden and Harris. Kamala. Yeah. I was trying to specifically thinking about how Kamala should be pronounced, and that is accurate, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think I heard at one point if you don't pronounce it right, it's a little racist, and I don't want to do that. So anyhow, Biden and Kamala got in, and it was supposed to be like this terrible thing, from the people on the right. And then we actually watched a little bit of the inauguration. It was like, oh, they're conducting themselves like adults. It seems to be okay after all. And then as it turns out, they're not perfect either. And so I just wanted to kind of get you on here to talk about some of these things from your perspective, because you are political you have done political activism, and you would align with the Democratic Party, correct?
Yes, and
okay.
So we started Arena to try and address a lot of the things that you're talking about. A lot of these political conversations that we have, they feel very zero sum. They feel very like, how are we going to come to some sort of resolution or consensus when the issues that we're talking about feel so like existential? And it seems like a lot of the conversations we were having were just yelling at each other, and it's hard to see how there's a path to, resolution or to agree with somebody. So part of what we set out to do was to help new candidates break in, help people who sort of feel called to by the moment, but who don't have a background in politics, who maybe don't have the money to run for office if they want to run, or don't have like a Rolodex of friends and family that they can call to bankroll their campaign. Part of what we wanted to set out to do was help new people break in, to just introduce new voices, new people, fresh faces to the conversation, to hopefully break some of the kind of like stalemate that we've reached in so many of these conversations. And yeah, it was a reaction to 2016.
Arena was?
It was.
And can you go back even before that and touch on, have you always been politically interested? Like when did you start to get politically interested and then involved? And was Arena the beginning of that for you personally?
Arena was the beginning of that for me. So okay. I actually started my career working in education. I've always, and to back up a little bit, I've always been someone who's mission driven.
Okay.
Like I like to do work where I can roll up my sleeves and do something that has real impact. I look for problems or challenges that we face in our communities and around the world, and where I think I can like make a meaningful difference in addressing that problem, and then I just go after it. Early in my career, that was education. I joined a program called Teach for America here in Nashville. I was a public school teacher, taught 5th grade social studies and then PE on the side. Did that until 2016.
Okay. When did you start that?
2011.
2011 to 2016, you were a school teacher here in Nashville.
Correct.
Yeah, and I didn't know that.
Yeah. And then in 2016, after the 2016 election, I was in our high school where we held a town hall with our students, sort of as like a, let's talk about the election kind of thing.
And by the way, what high school were you?
It was called Republic High School here in Nashville. It was a new high school that we opened probably in, 2014, 2015.
Teach for America opened it?
The nonprofit that I was working for opened it. So I worked for a nonprofit network of charter schools called Republic. And this was their first public high school called Republic High School. It's up in North Nashville off of Brick Church Pike.
Okay.
Super interesting. I can go into tons more detail about the high school, but at this town hall right after the election, we brought the students together to just talk about it. And that was the moment where I sort of felt called to politics, because several students started asking, am I at risk of deportation? Is my family going to be deported? Other students were asking, am I going to be forced to go through conversion therapy? In front of the whole school, people were asking these kinds of questions. And I just remember.
And they really are wondering.
Yes.
Like that these are honest questions.
Correct. I mean, the fear in the air was palpable and real. And I just remember my heart feeling broken. And it was in that moment that I decided I had to do something more politically oriented. So no, I wasn't always kind of wired that way, but that was the moment where I realized I got to do something. Mm-hmm. And so that was probably November 2016. Over the next couple of weeks, I linked up with a few friends of mine, and we decided to host an event called the Arena Summit, where we're going to bring people together and see what happens. Pretty much, it was a very simple concept. Like, let's bring our friends together in a room. Let's talk about these problems that we're facing, and let's forge new connections and see what kind of solutions we can come up with together.
Here in Nashville?
Here in Nashville. Okay. So this was now December 2016 here in Nashville. We hosted it at the convention center downtown. And little did we know, at the event, many people showed up saying, I want to run for office. Can you help me? There was a woman there named Lena Hidalgo from Houston. Well, she's originally from Columbia. She now lives in Harris County, Houston, Texas, saying she wanted to run for this obscure position called Harris County Judge, basically the mayor of Harris County. And Harris County is one of the most populous, I think it's third most populous county in the country because it has Houston in it.
Oh, wow.
Wow. And she showed up saying she wanted to run for county judge, basically the mayor, the county executive. And kind of an obscure, esoteric position, but she was filled with energy and enthusiasm, but again, didn't have that background or experience in politics, didn't really have a network of people she could turn to kind of support and stand up her campaign. There were others there too. There was another woman named Alessandra Biaggi, who's now a state senator in New York. And there was another woman, Lauren Underwood, who's now a congresswoman from Naperville, Illinois. Anyway, many people showed up who said, I want to run for office. Can you help me? And
so when you say it was you and a couple of friends, you're being a little bit understated here. This was in Nashville, but you had people from Houston coming here.
We put out a call to people around the country, and we just said, we're hosting this thing. If you want, it was obviously short notice. We said, if you want to come. We're bringing our friends together, and we're trying to figure out some solutions to our
like a month
political...
or two notice. Like, what are we talking here?
Well, yes. I mean, the election was November 2016, and the event was in December.
Oh wow. Okay.
So a few weeks, and it kind of organically just became this. That first event turned into several. People showed up at the first one, and then they said, let's do another one. And throughout that spring, we hosted several more arena summits. And that led to us supporting new candidates running for office. And it was a very organic transition, right? We were just reacting to the people that were showing up, asking for help. And I think they were very much showing up as a response to Trump, right?
Sure.
They decided, Trump got elected. I've got to do something. I've got to get more involved. I've got to show that that we can have a new generation of leaders, standing up and taking action and building careers in our political system. So we wound up supporting these new candidates running for office, supporting their races, just however we could. We were helping them fundraise. We hosted events to just raise dollars for them. We helped them hire and find staff to run and manage their campaigns. We joined weekly strategy calls where we were just helping set strategy on what they should do, how to organize. You got to imagine that if you're running for office for the first time, you don't know what to do. You don't know who to hire, what jobs to fill, what those job descriptions should be, what each person's responsibilities should be, how to fundraise. You got to start basically from scratch. And so we help people figure out a lot of those early things. So that was kind of through 2018. We supported over 60 candidates running for office to victory. And
2018.
So after
okay.
2016, a bunch of candidates showed up at our Arena Summit events, and we decided to support their races. And so they were running in 2018.
Yeah. And in 2018, 60 candidates got elected? Or you were supporting 60 candidates?
We ultimately supported more than 60 candidates to victory, I think, through, I want to say 2020. So I don't know what the number was just in 2018, but it was 60 between 2018 and 2020. But in 2018, we saw that all of our candidates faced a very common challenge, and staff was their big, in addition to fundraising, which is always a big challenge, staff was probably their number two. Just finding, hiring, and supporting professional campaign staff was really hard. There's not a lot of campaign managers out there who know how to run a really effective race for Harris County judge or for the state legislature or for Congress. And often the best people, like we were talking about at the very beginning, the people who run the most effective campaigns often leave and go do something else, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So we realized that if we were really going to help address some of these challenges, we've got to find, train, and support more staff to support these campaigns. So it was in 2018 that we pivoted our focus a little bit to kind of focus on this staffing challenge. And so we started hosting these events called the Arena Academy, where we recruited people who had an interest in just working in politics but didn't know where to start. They didn't want to run for office, but they wanted to work behind the scenes, or maybe even just volunteer, but they didn't really have the skills to do that. We created this 3-day-long training event called Arena Academy, where they show up and we taught them all the basics that they needed to know.
To manage a campaign, or you would teach them what they needed to know for whatever their job was going to be in the campaign?
The latter. So we had 7 different tracks that they could pick from. Campaign manager, finance director, digital director, organizing director. They self-select into the track that's most interesting to them, or they think they have the most experience.
But it would all be related to the campaign. When the candidate gets elected or not, then it's their job, that specific job is over.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So we stood up this training program to train all these new campaign staffers, and then we helped them find jobs. So we talked to candidates and campaigns around the country to figure out where are people kind of most needed. And then we basically functioned like a career center at a university would, helping match people to different jobs around the country on campaigns. So it kind of started. Arena started its journey as a candidate training organization, and then over time has become a campaign staffer training organization.
Interesting. And are you full time with Arena at that point, or are you still working another job?
It was like spring. I was the first employee of the organization, and that was like spring 2017. So it's sort of after that first event happened, and people were coming to us and saying, "Man, this sounds like a great idea, and we could really use something like this on a permanent, ongoing basis." And plus, I still had that town hall from our high school just sitting in my head. Like I was feeling very compelled and inspired to do something full time in the political space. I made the jump at that point.
Okay, so were you full time with Arena until your more recent?
Yes,
job
I was.
Oh,
yep.
okay.
Yep.
Okay,
I
gotcha.
was.
I didn't know. I actually didn't know that. I don't know when we met each other. It was at the gym for sure, and it's got to be a couple years, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, because I've been going to Forte since 2014, I want to say.
Oh, no kidding.
So it's been a minute.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I joined in 2018 and then basically took a year and a half off because of work related stuff. And then, yeah. So one of the things that I noticed on Arena's website was they are training Democratic candidates and campaign staff. And I think it even mentioned because there was a need there that maybe the same need they didn't perceive, at least with the Republicans. Like maybe the Republicans had been doing a better job of developing bench strength. Is this accurate? And how are they doing it?
Yeah.
Is there a Republican equivalent to like Arena? Or are they doing it different ways? Or
A little bit, but honestly, this is such a big problem that we could use solutions like this on both sides and in the middle, I think too. You know, Arena, we actually started our vision was to make it a kind of bipartisan effort. But what we found pretty quickly is that the people who were showing up at our events were, like I said earlier, reacting to Trump. And so they were pretty sort of steadfast Democrats who were showing up to our events. But I think this is such a big problem, and it's a problem on both sides. And I think that there's room for solutions like this.
Well, what's cool about it is, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds to me like you can take someone who might have the passion, the desire, the skill set, but not the right maybe connections or experiences.
Exactly.
And you help them with the connections and experiences. And golly, man, we need way more of that.
Yeah.
We need way more of that.
Yeah. Well, if you ever try and find a job in the political space, it's a lot of like, you just got to know the right person. People are just passing resumes around. It's like a very informal, behind the curtains kind of thing. And that's part of what we were trying to break.
At all levels, it's that way?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah. And so, because if you're someone who doesn't know the right person, it's really hard to break in or like know where to start. And so I think that's a problem across the board. If we really want to, have like a new generation of, young, inspiring, competent leaders on all sides and in all corners of our sort of political arena, I think there's room for lots of solutions like this.
How do you think about the elections that everyone's aware of in America, like the president and some of those like federal levels versus local? Do you think they're both very important, or do you think the local gets like underserved a lot because everyone's focused on the federal, like and they could actually do more impact if they'd focus locally? What are your thoughts on that?
That is a great question, and it's definitely what you just said. We tend to over focus on our federal, the kind of sexy elections at the expense of the local and state ones, where often the policy decisions that actually impact people in their everyday lives, that's where those decisions are being made in the state legislature, for example, right? There's a lot of policies happening in the Tennessee state legislature that actually impact our day-to-day lives living here in Nashville. And I think we tend to look past those races to look at who's running for U.S. Senate or who's running for Congress. And And so part of what we actually focus on the down ballot races. We still
What
supported,
does that mean,
so
down
like
ballot?
state and local races.
Okay.
Because we think that those tend to be ignored.
Okay.
And your investment of time and money goes a lot further in those races too.
Yes.
Money pours into federal campaigns almost to the point where sometimes they don't even know how to spend it all. The lower level campaigns have the opposite problem. They're starved for resources.
Interesting.
And so by support, we would place a staffer on a state legislative campaign. Often that meant doubling the campaign staff size. and there were some cases where we would pay for that staffer, so it was no cost to the it was like no cost to the campaign. Suddenly they're getting, a doubling in their staff size at no cost to them. You can imagine the difference that might make.
So you said it, but you think that focusing on the big sexy campaigns, the elections, is often at the expense of local.
Definitely. And it's like, and again, and that's a problem because the policies that actually impact our lives are being developed often at the state and local level.
Yes. What are the issues that the left cares most deeply about? I like to get in kind of some of this, like, from a different perspective, here, getting into some of these things and hearing it from your perspective. First of all, is it accurate or okay? No, accurate. Is left synonymous with Democrat and right synonymous with Republican? Or when I say the left, like, does that mean a different thing than if I would say the Democratic Party?
I think it's synonymous. I think it's mostly synonymous.
It's close enough
yeah,
that you can. Okay.
I think so.
Right. Okay.
And we could probably debate whether or not that's a good thing, but
okay.
I think it is. I think it's probably synonymous.
Yeah, it would be fascinating to know where like the right and the left ever did come from to begin with, because I've never heard anything about that. Do you know or no?
I don't know.
I'm not sure.
Are you asking me?
I don't know.
I thought you looked at me.
Yeah, you can look it up if you want to. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question.
The issues that the left cares most deeply about. What do you think those are?
Well, I think we tend to over focus on some of the wrong issues, right? And this is some of me just speaking from like my personal opinion. We at Arena, we were not policy or issue oriented. We were candidate oriented, right? So we picked people more based on like their values and less based on like which specific policies they were in favor of. And we didn't have like a checklist of things that we were looking for. You must support this, and this. We didn't have anything like that. So we looked for candidates who like, can they tell a clear story about like why they're running, how they're going to help their constituents? Are they from the community that they're trying to represent? Do they just seem like a nice and real person who you can imagine like sitting down and having a genuine and authentic conversation with? Those were the kinds of things that we looked for. But I think that said, I think part of what we're running into in some of these political conversations that we're talking about is that we tend to talk about issues, cultural issues, where like we might just not agree sometimes,
right?
But I think that's okay if we don't agree. But I think what's happening is we talk about these issues, we realize we don't agree, and then we're just in paralysis.
Right. And
that's the problem. It's the paralysis that's the problem, not the disagreement. And so I think, I don't know. I wish there was a way we could have conversations where we disagree, but are still able to make forward progress on policies that we can agree on. And I think we're missing a lot of that right now in our political, we're talking about all these cultural issues where like the right and the left are just not going to agree. Mm-hmm. And so we need to find issues that we can agree on, where we can make progress, where we can come up with like sensible policy and sensible solutions to help make people's lives better. And there are so many out there. But the problem is we're spending all of our time just talking about the cultural stuff that we can't even get to like, how do we fix these very specific things?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm curious from your perspective, in what areas does the right most misunderstand the left?
Yeah. I mean, there's plenty.
There's got to be a
I mean,
lot.
yeah.
I mean, there's got to be a
like,
lot.
Honestly,
on both sides.
All of them. It often feels like we're starting from a totally different baseline. And so I think there's many issues where we're like hardly speaking the same language or not even able to agree on basic facts. And
why is that? Why is that? Because that seems like that might be a problem at some point.
Definitely it's a huge problem.
Yeah, it's like if we can't agree on the basic facts, it's hard to see how we can find a better way forward. Like it's gotten to the point where the right has their set of facts and the left has theirs, and they're contradictory. They don't really work together, and it's like if that's how it's going to remain, that seems like a real issue.
Yeah, I mean, as soon as issues. I mean, the issue of the last couple of weeks has been the gas stoves. I don't know if you've followed this discourse at all.
What's up with gas stoves?
So there was some research that came out a few weeks ago that said that gas stoves are a significant cause of asthma and other issues for kids. And it was suggested that there might be limits on our ability to install gas stoves in our home in the future as a result. And this created a big firestorm. A lot of people on the right in particular were saying, you can't take away my gas stove, that sort of thing. Then people on the left start digging in and they're saying, oh, but the gas stoves are causing all these health problems. And it quickly bubbles up into, people weren't even talking about gas stoves a month ago.
Gotcha.
And now just weeks later, it's become this like very inflamed issue. And I think both sides are kind of talking past each other at this point on it. It's like it's hard to have like a rational, sane conversation. So I think that that's one. It gets so heated and people get so angry and they're just yelling at each other and firing off 280 character tweets at each other where there's no nuance. And certainly there's a lot of people on the left that are guilty of this. Like we tend to just like judge too quickly and assume the worst in people too quickly. Like if I'm going to have a conversation with you and try and convince you of something, like I need to actually listen to what you're saying. I need to actually consider your point of view. And I need to take a moment to like think about what information do I need to like present you to kind of make the case for my position. But those are often not the political conversations we have. Like it's just yelling. It's just my way. It's my way or the highway. I'm right. You're wrong. I'm like hardly able even to listen or consider your point of view. And I think it too quickly devolves into that.
Totally. And a lot of people, and you want to get it, you don't want to like betray your tribe either.
Yeah.
Right? Like I think sometimes people, they might have their opinion, but it's like first they need to see where their tribe's at on this. Then when they know that, then they're like, then they're willing to express their personal opinion. Maybe it's what they thought all along.
Yeah.
But now they're willing to express it because their tribe feels that same way. But until they know that, they don't really want to speak out too much because God forbid you say something.
Right.
And it's like,
and it goes against what other
it goes against like your tribe or whatever.
Yeah. Well, that's funny because in the first week of this gas stove thing, it was very much like that. There were people on the right and the left that were saying things that where you were like, oh, maybe they will agree. But then people start to harden into their positions. They figure out what's the like, what are the talking points? What's the red line I can't cross? And then as the weeks pass, people start to filter into their camps. It's happened real time in front of us over the last month. And it's like, I don't know, it's a little bit disheartening to see.
Yeah. What would be some of your biggest disagreements with the right? Is there anything that comes to mind there? For you personally, when you think about, why you're a Democrat and not a Republican, what are some of those core things, would you say?
I mean, it comes down to my values as a person, I think a little bit. I'm someone who doesn't believe in like racism, sexism, misogyny, xenophobia, et cetera. And so, and that's always where I'm going to start from. And so I'm going to look for the person or the party or the side or the candidate who starts from that place. And often I find, unfortunately, that at least from my perspective, people on the right do not start from that place. So that's usually where, like, personally, I struggle.
Yeah. Well, look, that's totally fair. I mean, my goodness, all of those things are terrible. Do you find that is your perspective that the right are generally that, or they just don't care enough about it?
I think it's both. I think the right has made space in their party for some crazy people who believe some crazy things. And so I think that it has allowed a lot of these crazy views to kind of bubble up to the surface and go more mainstream. Mm-hmm. I think there's plenty of people in the Republican Party who don't believe in racism and sexism, and they would sit here and say, "Oh no, I'm totally against all of those things." But at the same time, they've created this vacuum, this space for those views to thrive. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's a big problem.
That's a very interesting perspective. And I think I could see how you would get there based on some of Trump's behavior, or at least the way that the media portrayed him. And is there other? I assume there is. Like, I assume there's even a history on the right before Trump that would cause you to be like, yeah, these are my values here, and what I'm seeing over there on the right, they tend to not align with this. Like, even pre-Trump.
Yeah, a little bit, but it definitely got way more pronounced after 2016.
Okay, yeah.
I think those things were there, but they were much more under the surface.
Mm-hmm. Now, going back to that moment in your school where some of these kids had legitimate questions about whether they're going to be deported, was there policy that Trump was talking about that would indeed have caused them to be deported, or was there sort of a narrative that was being built up by the media and everything that they were buying into that was in no way going to happen, but it caused them to have fear?
It felt possible at the time.
Okay.
I'll tell you that much, So like, it felt like it could happen. It didn't ultimately, but it felt possible. Mm-hmm. And the fact that those students were willing to be vulnerable and even talk about that in front of a room of their mm-hmm. sort of peers, I think speaks to how possible that felt in that moment.
Yeah. Yep. So equality would be one core value that you would have as a person, and you feel like that aligns better with the left and the right.
Yes, I think so. At least in our current situation and in our current moment.
Yeah,
yes,
I mean, look, it's your perspective. I mean, I'm not going to argue with that whatsoever. I mean, that's your perception. Plus, it might be right. I don't know. What else comes to mind?
Oh, let's see.
I'm just sort of curious if there's other like big sort of foundational things that.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of talked about this towards the beginning, but our politics is not very professionalized, and that was part of what we built Arena to try and solve. There's this huge turnover of people coming in and out. We stand up these campaign operations. We send all these really talented people to go work on it. They figure it all out, and then hopefully the campaign wins, and then it just goes away. And then we quit, and then the next group of people has to just show up and like figure it out.
Oh,
there's no transfer of knowledge or information or talent, and so we are constantly standing up and then tearing down infrastructure. And part of the way I think that we actually get out of this, and I think this is true on both sides, is that we professionalize our politics a little bit more, make it a career that people can see themselves working in for a long time. And certainly it's just true on the left, just because that's where more of my experience is. I imagine it's true on the right also, but just the kind of brain drain that happens in our political spaces is a real problem.
So you may be against term limits then?
I'm actually for. I think I'm for term limits, but also for like helping somebody become like a career campaign manager, where they can manage several campaigns of several different people over the course of their career.
Yeah, because that's one of the things that stood out to me that I guess I just didn't ever occur to me quite in this way is let's say I want to run for that. It's Harris County, that judge.
Yeah, Harris County judge.
Say I want to run to be Harris County judge. Man, if I don't know the first thing, so we would need someone with some experience to help run a campaign. But it seems hard to find because you're assembling a fresh team every time. Because if I get elected, my campaign manager is out of a job.
Yep.
So is everyone on the campaign. So now what do they do?
Yep.
And I would assume to be involved in a campaign, it's sort of a full-time gig for a short period of time.
Yes.
Like maybe more than full-time.
Yeah.
Like a lot maybe.
Yeah.
So it's like a real intense thing for a short period of time. It doesn't really work to have a full-time job, but it's only, what is it, a year?
8 months, a year, and then it just goes away.
And then it goes away.
Yep.
So this does seem like the type of thing where it's just a lot of churn. It's almost like you're starting over every time. But what's to be done about that?
We need to invest earlier, right? So like in addition to we at Arena, we were constantly telling you, it was the question you asked earlier. We were constantly telling people you got to look at the state and local races. In addition to that, we've also got to look at races earlier in the cycle. We have this tendency to wait until months before the election when it's kind of feels real and feels close. But these campaigns are won and lost, and the operations are it's decided much earlier than that, and we need to be sending resources and people and talent to these campaigns just much earlier than we are right now.
Yeah. Yep.
Like a lot of donors will show, for the elections in November, donors will show up in October saying, "Oh, I want to donate a bunch of money to this campaign," but like often at that point, they can't even put your money. They can't even put your money to good work if they wanted, even if they wanted to.
Okay.
Maybe they can buy some ads with it, but they're not going to hire another person in October. So, if we really want to solve this problem, we've got to direct more resources to campaigns earlier in the cycle.
That makes sense. How much roughly does it cost to run a campaign to be the Harris County judge?
Great question. I do not know off the top of my head. I suspect that one's kind of expensive, just given how many people live in Harris County. Okay. But a lot of races for smaller offices, school board, even state legislative races, like, I don't know, $100,000. It's not as much as you might think, where some of these U.S. Senate races are in the millions of dollars.
Okay.
So it's an order of magnitude difference.
Yep. So like for that $100,000, that gets you some help. Gets you some ads. It gets you some, getting the word out. That's what you need.
Yeah.
Campaign.
Yeah.
Okay.
A lot of the smaller races, it's like it's 1 to 2 people that are on the staff.
Let's come back to your core value as a human, like you're, anti-racist, not into misogyny, those things that you listed, which I would totally appreciate. I guess I'm wondering, is there a misunderstanding going on between the right thinks the left is too into woke culture and the left just wants to have equality? Like, is this an area we're missing each other in? Because that was a very surprising answer, honestly. When you said that, I'm thinking, oh shoot, like is there systemic those things on the right? Because that'd be a real bummer. Those are pretty bad things.
Yeah. I mean, I think unfortunately there are those. That is a systemic problem on the right. Again, I don't think it's true of everybody on the. I don't think it's true of everybody on the right, but I think the space for it has been created.
Do you think the space for it has really been created with Trump, primarily?
Yes.
Or?
I do. Okay. I think it was sort of there before, but it was more in the undercurrents. And then now I think with Trump out in the open, coming down the golden escalator and saying that all the Mexicans are rapists, I think it just created this much more apparent space for it to kind of bubble up.
Mm-hmm. So then how would you view the woke culture that's happening right now? Would you view this as good, or would you view it as getting a little bit carried away? One of the big name comedians, I think it was Tom Segura or someone similar, was saying that they had toured a high school in California, and they're at this, they had a parents meet and the teacher meeting to see, to learn more about the school. And one of the parents asked the question, is it true at this school that they have a white kid stand on a chair and all of the the minority kids on the floor yelling obscenities at the white kids standing on the chair, and they were like, "Yeah, that they do that.
Oh,
here.
wow.
They do that here." And so Tom or whoever it was like, "Yeah, well, we can't go here to school." Like, would you see that as an overreach, or would you see that as like we're finally leveling the field a little bit? Like, to me, that seems like I could see where someone would look at that and say that's a little bit of an overreach, of equalization, or like that's like going a little too far with the woke stuff.
Yeah, to me that would seem like an overreach. I think that this goes back to what we were talking about a few minutes ago. I think especially, and I think a lot of people on the left are guilty of this, of communicating with a lot of judgment, right? Or like communicating their beliefs with a lot of, while also making a lot of assumptions about the people that they're communicating them to. And I think too many of our conversations are one way and not two way. Like in that example, it's just the one side kind of yelling literally at the other, where I think what we actually should be doing, if we really were, wanted to reach a kind of productive, healthy solution, is having a two-way dialogue where we're actually listening to each other, where we're like trying to consider the perspective of the other person while also offering our own. But I think that there are lots of people on the left and on the right too, but it's definitely true of people on the left who, they believe what they believe, and they're not going to, hear it or have it any other way, and they're just going to, keep saying their talking points, their positions.
Yeah. Well, that definitely happens on the right.
Yeah,
too.
yeah. I mean, but we just don't listen to each other anymore.
Yeah,
and we don't assume, and we also don't assume the best of each other either. So it's like hard to imagine how you're gonna end up in like a positive, healthy place.
Yes.
At the end of a conversation.
So
I guess to answer your question, yes, I do think I think there's plenty of examples where it's like, quote unquote, gone too far. But now that said, I also think that like conversations are good, accountability is good. Like the events of the last couple of years, the murder of George Floyd, et cetera, like a lot of these conversations are super important. It is important that we're having them. I think a lot of them are being had in poor ways.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yes. Yes, I agree. And I think, the George Floyd gets mentioned a lot, and as rightfully so. But man, the one I think of a lot too is Ahmaud Arbery. I mean, that's just like anytime like George Floyd gets mentioned, I think of Ahmaud Arbery too, because I don't hear as much about him.
Yeah.
And and maybe, well, actually, one of the guys was an ex-cop, wasn't they? Is that right or wrong? No, maybe, shoot, I don't know. I'm thinking, I don't remember, so that might be completely wrong. But that seemed like such evidence of racism that it didn't get the press because it wasn't like a active duty police officer. But yeah, man, we have a ways to go in this country yet.
Definitely.
How about shoot, I was going to ask you something else along those lines, but now I can't remember what it was about that.
He was an ex-police officer.
He was? Yeah. Let me ask you this. It seems to me like the one area that we're also sort of like entrenched in a little bit is the left seems to like to talk about the right as in we need to make sure they don't set up an authoritarian government and basically screw our democracy. And the right likes to talk about the left as if they're all corrupt. It seems like, are those fair stereotypes, would you say? Like,
I mean, I think often with like stereotypes
Not
often
as in-
have a
not-
basis of stereotypes
okay.
often have a basis of truth to them, right?
Okay.
Like it starts somewhere.
Yep.
Usually it becomes embellished and exaggerated over time, but it's usually starts with some basis of truth. There are plenty of people on the left who are like, career politicians who are just in it for the fame or the notoriety or whatever, but not really because they care about helping and serving people. And that's a real problem. And our system is designed to keep the people in power who are in power, right? So once you're in office, it's a lot easier to stay there. There are strong incentives to stay there for a really long time. And I think the longer you stay there, the more likely it is that you kind of are just like part of the system and a little bit more disconnected from, the everyday people in your district or your constituents. And so that's actually why I think term limits are a good idea. Because I think this tends to be, the pattern that you see is the longer someone's in office, the more likely that they, they're like more kind of part of the system, so to speak.
Yes.
So I think, fresh faces, fresh perspectives, new people, a new generation is good no matter what.
Yep. But also it would help if we would make the job not suck so bad.
Yeah, that's true too.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, because
and pay a little bit better too.
Exactly. Because Colby turned me on to the All In podcast, and I know we talked about it briefly at the gym the other week, but they were just talking about this in one of their recent episodes, and Sachs was just making the point that what's in it for him to get involved politically? I mean, maybe he will, maybe he won't. I have no idea, but it's just there's not a lot of upside unless you like power, which lots of people do.
Yeah, well, it's that or you want to help people. It's either you want the power or you want to help people, and we hopefully want to lift up more people who want the helping people part of that.
But if it's but see, there's a better human or an easier human explanation for someone willing to give up some of the niceties that they have for the power because it plays on human nature. But for someone to give up the niceties they have in exchange in order to help people, that takes real
it's a big sacrifice.
Character.
Yeah.
That takes real integrity, and that's a sacrifice. And it seems like there's less of that out there. So you think those are fair stereotypes that the right sometimes has or tends to trend towards authoritarianism, and the left maybe corruption?
I don't know if I would classify it as corruption more as I would. I don't even know what the right. I don't know what the right word is because I don't think there are people on the. I don't think there's at least a lot. I'm sure there are some people on the left who are corrupt, but I don't think that is a large, widespread problem. I think the problem is more. It's a little more nuanced than that. I think it's that people have been in the system for a long time, and there's not a lot of. It's just they're just kind of part. They know a lot of lobbyists. They don't spend a lot of time talking to constituents. They're spending all their time in DC instead of in their district.
That makes sense.
And so they're just more part of the sort of political machine.
Sure.
As opposed to doing it to help the people that elected them.
Yep. So do you think there's more career politicians on the left than the right?
No, I think this is probably a problem on both sides.
Okay.
So I think there are career politicians on both sides who have succumbed to this.
Okay. I don't know a lot about Mitch McConnell, but he looks like he's been at it for a long time.
Yeah. I mean, Dianne Feinstein, U.S. Senator from California.
Yeah.
She was in the news the last couple of days because two other Democrats in the state have decided to run against her. Dianne Feinstein is 89 years old.
Wow.
And she needs to decide whether or not she's going to run for re-election for a 6-year term to the U.S. Senate.
Oh, my goodness. She's considering it?
The fact that she's considering it just makes you roll your eyes because it's like why?
Why? That's exactly what I was thinking. Why?
So there's already other people that have stepped up to run for the seat, but the fact that she hasn't yet said, I'm going to turn that it's now time for someone new to step in.
Yeah.
To me, that just seems crazy.
Here's a perspective that I would love to hear from you. What was your experience or perception of QAnon? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do. I'm not someone who went deep down that rabbit hole. Of course, I know what QAnon is, and I'm aware of its existence. But and unfortunately, I have a few people in my life who've gone down the rabbit hole. But I don't have a ton of firsthand or personal exposure.
So it was something that sort of was, and you heard a little bit about it, and there was some chatter or whatever, but you didn't really get that involved in it. You didn't hear that much about it. It didn't affect your life that much. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, I do have a good friend of mine though, who's always been kind of, he's been conservative and, on the right, so to speak, but never very politically active. I just knew him and his family as like a conservative person. But then after 2016, he and his whole family have gone down the QAnon hole. And you ask them and they'll tell you it's all real.
Yeah. Oh yeah, man. Yeah. And there's some crazy stuff got lumped in with there, but it's interesting to hear your experience of it, because this probably speaks to me hearing the voices from the right loudest in general, on average. These are generalities, because, dude, I heard a lot about QAnon, man.
Yeah.
A lot. More than I cared to hear.
Still or no?
No, it died off pretty quick.
Yeah.
When did it die off? After 2020?
It died off.
Or more recently than that?
It died off after it became reasonably apparent that Trump was not going to go back and take over the White House.
I see.
Listen, Let me just tell you something right now. I know parents of friends. The friends are my age, so the parents are in their 60s. Really good people.
Yeah. And probably, let me guess, intelligent, smart, educated.
Yeah, decent people that were sure, not it could happen, were positive that a year after the election that Trump was going to go back in and take over the White House. I mean, it was, to wrap my head around that, it's like it a lot of the stuff got so weird, and the people that were buying into it were people that I know and were very reasonable people, that it was like a what's that term when you have like a disconnect? It's like it was just like a dissonance, like a disconnect. Yeah. I still cannot properly describe to you what happened. The best way I know how to describe it, which by the way, it wasn't all wrong. Like a couple times I would hear things that when I heard it, I'm like, come on, seriously? And then a year or two later, guess what? It happened. So there was a category for that too. I'm not saying it was all wrong. It wasn't all false, but a lot of it was false.
Yeah.
A lot of it was crazy. I mean, I'm talking like some of these people still believe that Michelle Obama is actually a man and she's covering as a woman. Like when Trump got COVID, it was because he was going out to, he didn't actually get COVID. He was going out to some ship to judge the Clintons. Dude, I mean, I'm embarrassed to even say this stuff out loud.
Tom Hanks.
What was the Tom Hanks one?
Same thing. Clintons, they're all in conspiracy.
Well, I mean, the Clintons probably are in a conspiracy with Tom Hanks, but is that what you're saying? Yeah. Okay. Well, that could be
child abducting and things.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. Like when the ship was brought into New York City, it was because they were going to bring out all of these abducted children underground in New York City. I forgot about a lot of stuff. I don't even want to talk more about it.
Sorry to bring it up.
Yeah, because it was the sex slavery for children was one of the core things of the QAnon stuff. I had kind of forgotten this. But anyhow, it was crazy town. And the best that I know how to describe it with some of the fringe stuff, again, it wasn't all wrong, but there was some really weird stuff on the fringes. And it seemed like for some reason that it was really popular with the more conservative people and even like people of faith for some reason.
Yeah.
I don't know why. But it seemed the best way I know how to describe it was there was a season there where it felt like there was like a spell that was being like cast on people. Like it seemed like people got caught up in a spell. It's the only way I know how to really describe some of the weirdness.
Yeah, I mean, I feel that too. it sounds like maybe you were exposed to it a little bit more than I was, but from the limited exposure I did have, I certainly felt that way. It's like, it was like hard. It's like hard to process how people could come to those conclusions.
Yeah. And I think that Trump was such a, it's a discussion all of its own, but there was people that just got so bought into Trump that I would have never guessed. Like okay, if you say they assessed their options and voted for him, and then even supported him somewhat, I could understand that. At the end of the day, we're all just assessing options, casting the vote or whatever, and maybe showing some support or not, or maybe you're just quiet at that point. You've done your job, Yeah, I could get that. I could understand that, but it was like there was a lot of people that got so bought in and got so behind him. It was almost like he had this like savior. It was like he had this like savior effect on people. It was like he was like a little god. Like he was so. And these were people that you wouldn't think they would like align with Trump's personal values.
Yeah. Well, again, like the people that I know that went down this path, they weren't even that politically interested before 2016. And so like a lot of it was a lot of the people who I saw who this hit the hardest were people who were not super dialed in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no doubt. And I think
it's scary.
It was scary. It was scary because it was really, really weird. And I think Trump played into it a little bit. Like he kept some of that stuff. He'd stoke the fires.
Yeah.
Every so often, like
it seemed like he was aware of its existence and kind of just.
But he pretended that he wasn't.
Yeah.
But he was aware of it.
Like wink, wink.
Exactly. 100%. And I think this speaks to some of Trump's public brilliance, like knowing what to give people when and how to like get his way. I mean, I think he's pretty good at that.
Yeah. Oh, he's like a master manipulator in that way.
For sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. What's your perspective on Tulsi Gabbard not aligning with the Democratic Party anymore? Because she was. I thought that when, let's see, who was it? Well, it was Biden and Kamala running against Trump and Pence, and no, yeah, I was thinking that I'm sorry, I screwed that up because this is not what I was thinking at that time. But it seemed like Tulsi had some real potential. Like she's a woman, she's a minority, she's very smart, she's politically experienced a little bit, and she's with the Democrat Party. Like it seemed like she had a real future, but it also seemed like she was not fitting in there. They weren't like pushing her along towards the end there. And then she decided to leave because of those reasons. What's your perspective on that?
Yeah. I've always gotten a bit of a weird vibe from Tulsi, if I'm honest. Even back when she was more explicitly kind of Democrat progressive. I know she's kind of in this middle zone now.
You're not just saying that because she left the Democratic Party?
No, I'm not.
Really?
No.
You always had a weird vibe from her.
She always seemed like someone who, back to our conversation from a few minutes ago, was more in it for the power and the notoriety than the actual helping of people. So back in when she was running for president. So this would have been back in 2019, maybe. We were hosting one of the Arena Academy events that I was talking about earlier, and she just showed up out of the blue, unexpected. We weren't expecting her, and so you got to imagine we're in this. I think this was in. I want to say we were in Arizona, so we were in Phoenix. Maybe it was Arizona or Iowa. I can't remember, but in any event. We were hosting this event. We're in like some hotel downtown in the middle of the city. We've got 200-300 people there. We're doing a bunch of training sessions on like how to be a campaign manager, how to be a finance director, how to be an organizing director. Tulsi showed up, and we were like in the middle of sessions, and we weren't expecting her. And she kind of insisted that we stopped everything that we were doing for the few hundred people that were at this event and move them all and bring them all back together so that she could address the group.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Like spontaneously, spur of the moment, sort of interrupting our whole like flow and plan for what we were doing. So we politely declined her request. I think she left a little bit disappointed and a little bit unhappy with us, but that's kind of my like one experience with Tulsi.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. She always just struck me as somebody who was looking for a path to achieve kind of like fame and notoriety. And actually, I think her recent actions sort of prove that out a little bit, you know? Like she has sort of carved out this niche for her where that is becoming kind of true, you know? Like I don't think she's not actually helping constituents or helping people, but she is developing like a name for herself.
Sure.
You know?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I would have to imagine that she has become quite a lot more popular.
Yeah.
I mean, she certainly would become more popular from the right, correct? Even if she doesn't go Republican.
Right.
You know, the fact that she left the Democratic Party and all of that. But that is interesting to hear that experience. It's stuff like that I don't ever get to experience with any of them. You know what I mean? Like
yeah. And look, like if she had contacted us a few days before and said, "Hey, I'm going to be in town. Can I stop by for 15 minutes and say hi to all these like young people who are trying to work on campaigns?" Like we would have figured it out. We would have made it work, but it was sort of the sort of like air of superiority that she kind of showed up with. This just kind of rubbed us the wrong way.
So, all right. So you have not necessarily been a fan of her all along. So when she kind of like ups and
it didn't even come as that much of a
it's
surprise. It
just
didn't
not
even come as a surprise to me when that happened.
Yeah. Interesting. Who are you? Who do you see has a lot of potential on the left? Who do you like?
Yeah, I will show my cards and admit my bias here. I'm a big fan of Pete Buttigieg.
Okay.
I just think he to my point earlier where we look for the values. He's somebody who's driven by his values and who it seems like a real and authentic person. And I think in whatever position that he's in is driven by the right reasons, right? Like he wants to help people. He wants to pass policies that will like actually improve people's lives. I've always thought he's a very effective communicator. If you watch him on TV, he will take like tax policy or other really like tedious things and explain them in like easy to understand
That's
and
gotta be
follow
hard.
ways. Yes, it is.
That's got to be hard.
Well, he's the
That's
transportation.
gotta be like an art.
Yeah, he's the transportation secretary now, and over the last couple of weeks, there's been between the Southwest thing and then the FAA shutdown. He's been on the news a bunch trying to, talk through some of that. But he can take like tedious, complicated things and explain them in like an easy to understand way. He's a really effective communicator. He's not afraid to like go on Fox News or go on other outlets that are typically associated with like the right. So he'll talk to all the, he'll go everywhere. When his presidential campaign, one of the strategy that they implemented was do all the press. So they would talk to anybody, left, right, center. They were saying yes to pretty much every media and press opportunity that they could. And that was how he got some of that initial traction and really made a name for himself early. Yeah, I don't know. I just think Pete has a sort of bright career ahead of him.
So did he run? Did he run in 2020?
He did.
Okay.
Yep.
And do you know what his plans are in the future?
I don't.
Publicly, anyway.
I'm not sure. I mean, he's the transportation secretary at the moment. I don't know what his future plans are.
Okay. And that is an appointment, correct?
Yes.
So Biden would appoint
Correct.
him to something like that.
Correct.
I wanted to ask you about also the classified documents that they keep finding everywhere. I saw the reason
Drip.
Yeah. The reason I'm chuckling is because I saw on Nashville, there's this Instagram account, like Nashville, Tennessee, or Nashville something. It's like, one of those accounts like for tourism in the city. And it posted a fake TV shot of like breaking news. They found classified documents at the Hermitage, and Andrew Jackson's family is upset or whatever. It was kind of funny because these documents apparently just keep popping up everywhere.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've heard said about this is that it could like maybe we're just overclassifying things.
I think that's definitely true.
Like the government they're trying to protect too much information, and they just slap the classified on way too much stuff.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day,
And then it becomes impossible to manage.
how in the world are you going to manage
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
Do you think that's what it is, or do you think because I think there was another viewpoint on the documents being found in Biden's office or whatever it was, where like one of the thoughts was, well, maybe they're kind of setting him up to let him down easy. Like if the party doesn't want to run him again in 24, could this be a way that, they make it more apparent earlier that it's just not going to.
Yeah,
Like,
interesting.
do you think it's that, or do you think that's just they just found documents because there's too many classified documents?
I think there's a bunch of things happening all at the same time. And this issue, it seems simple on the surface, but I actually think it's like kind of nuanced and complex. And like a lot of that, if you just read like a 10-second or see a 10-second news clip, that you miss all of the complexity and nuance. So I think it's definitely true that we're overclassifying things. There are just way too many classified documents, which makes it an impossible system to manage. And then we keep them all classified for too long.
Yes,
right?
Exactly.
Stuff from a long time ago doesn't need to remain classified. There's no real national security secrets that are being protected after a certain point in time. So I think we could declassify things much faster.
Yep.
And solve a lot of this. If you read into the details, it sort of seems like, at least in Biden's case, it just seems like a big oopsie, like he's the old guy and he, got some boxes in the garage and he's like, oh, well, look at this here. Oops. Whereas you read the details on the Trump version of it and it seems much more intentional. There was a year of conversations of the documents trying to recover the documents and Trump saying no. So the issue, I think
they were looking for specific documents and he was saying no.
Yes,
And then
Trump was insisting. My understanding, this is all new to me in the last few months. I'm learning about this issue in real time, kind of as we go, and I'm no expert. So, but my understanding of it is that government documents are property of the government. Right. So classified documents are government property because they are the property of the people of the country. Right. So they're sort of our property, but through
we don't get to see it.
We don't get to see them. Correct. We don't get to see them, but they're our property through the government. You would think maybe we get to see them over time once they declassify them, but like they're the government property of the people of the country. Right. Trump was insisting, no, they're my property. These are mine. And so it was that was really the kind of the core of that disagreement. In Biden's case, I don't think he was ever making the claim that they were his. I think it was they said, whoops, we didn't even intend for these to be here.
Yep.
And they were turned over right away.
Yep.
So,
and then they found some at Pence's house also, right?
Yes, I saw that too.
Okay,
so, and again, I think but then back to the original point, there's too many classified documents.
Yeah. It's
like, if there's too many, of course they're going to inadvertently, when Joe Biden has worked in politics all his life, so like inadvertently, he's going to end up with something in his bag or at home that he wasn't supposed to have, and that it's just like
is it
bound to happen.
Is it
with the way the current system is designed? I don't think it's really a people problem. I think it's more of a system design problem.
Well, I think it's sort of metaphorical for some of the things that it would be good if we could change with the government, which is, look, apparently at the end of the day, it doesn't matter that much who's president. I mean, there's probably really good arguments against that exact statement, but look, we had Trump and we're still a country. I mean, we have Biden and we're still working. And what I'm speaking to is like the people that never get elected and never leave. Like that's the career people like working that are not elected. They don't ever go anywhere, and presidents come and go and they stay.
Yeah.
It seems like increasingly those are the people that are running this country.
Yeah.
Which is not great.
No.
Because they're not elected officials.
Right.
But and they don't want the information getting out. So it kind of seems like, these classified documents popping up everywhere because we're slapping classified on everything. Like it's almost like an indication of a bigger problem.
Yeah. That makes sense.
What do you think about what do you think is most likely going to happen between DeSantis and Trump going into 2024, do you think?
if I knew the answer to that,
You make some money.
yeah, or something, something. You know, man, I don't know. I hope Trump doesn't run because I'm ready to just like turn the chapter and turn the page. But you know, but
he said he's going.
He
to,
is.
Right?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm just saying. I wish he wasn't.
Yeah. Well, if he didn't, DeSantis would be the clear front runner.
I think so.
Is that correct?
It seems that way.
Yeah.
And it seems like he might be running anyway, despite the Trump, and there might be a sort of standoff between the two of them, which could be interesting to see what happens there. But
yes.
You know, I think if we think back to 2016, you know, Trump ran as the outsider, as the sort of anti-establishment candidate. I think there's a chance he might try and do that again. You know, even as the person who was just the Republican president, he might now start saying, like, DeSantis is the establishment.
I could see that.
And I'm the
Absolutely.
outsider trying to break back in. He might take this
Absolutely.
outsider path again.
I
which
watch.
could be interesting.
I just get my news from one email bullet point that gets emailed to me every morning, and then every so often I'll check in on breaking points on YouTube. And what I like about them is they have a dude and a gal, and one is right and one is left.
Yeah, I've listened to them a few times.
Yeah, and they were they were showing. I didn't know anything about this, but they were saying in the video that Ben Shapiro, who I do know who he is, and then a guy named Steven Crowder, who I don't know who he is. They're having a little bit of a spat.
I heard about this.
And it was Steven Crowder that cropped
Steven
it up.
Crowder was offered a job. Ben Shapiro offered Steven Crowder a job, and then he.
Yeah, I think it was $50 million over 4 years. But that sounds like a lot. Maybe that's too much. It was a lot of money. And then Crowder basically took this contract and like redacted some sensitive information on it and went public with it and was like using it against Ben Shapiro. And one of their hypotheses on this was, is it possible that Crowder is trying to align himself against Shapiro and the establishment because Shapiro apparently likes DeSantis more than Trump. And so could it be like it's going to go like Steven Crowder and his guys with Trump
interesting.
and Shapiro and DeSantis, and there's going to be this showdown. But like I said, I don't even know who Steven Crowder is, so I don't know much more about all that than literally what I just said. But if that happens, it could get gnarly.
Yeah.
It could get gnarly between Trump and DeSantis. If like the figureheads like Ben Shapiro, and I can't imagine Crowder's his equal, but if he has a big tribe and they start yelling at each other, I mean, good grief.
Yeah.
It's going to be entertaining again at best.
Yeah, I don't know much about that.
Yeah. What do you think the moderates as an emerging class, is there any future there? Or are we just entrenched here where it's right and left and there's not a good, you get elected by like appealing to like the extremes.
Mm-hmm.
What would have to happen for more people to like come together and I guess consider themselves more moderates as opposed to, extreme right, extreme left?
Right now, all the incentives are pushing people to the extremes, which is not a good thing.
Exactly.
Even though I'm someone who I think of myself as I'm on the left, I'm a progressive person, I'm a Democrat. Like I consider myself relatively moderate, though, like a relatively moderate person on the left. But it often feels like there's hardly space for that. I know people on the right who feel similarly. They consider themselves conservative and on the right, but they look at the party and it's too extreme for them. I mean, I just described my dad earlier. He's been a lifelong Republican. He's voted Republican his entire life. But then 2016 came around. He couldn't get himself to vote for Trump. I can't remember if he voted for Clinton. He either didn't vote or he like begrudgingly voted for Clinton. I don't remember which one of those two it was, but like I would describe him this way: like he's relatively moderate, but conservative and on the right, and he would love to support like moderate, but conservative candidates. And I think that our system is, unfortunately, it's a system design problem. All of our the whole structure of our system is just designed to push people further and further and further. I think there are some solutions that are being proposed that are interesting. A lot of people are talking about ranked choice voting as a potential way around this, because if you know, so part of these incentives, like, it all comes down to the primaries, right? If you can win the primary, you're going to probably win the general. You're going to, as long as you're in a district that favors your party, you're going to win the general. The primary is actually the election that matters. The candidate that emerges from the primary successful will be the one that probably wins the general, right? Like if you're running in New York in a pretty blue Democratic place, as long as you win the Democratic primary, you're going to win the general. You're going to win the general election.
Makes sense.
Conversely, if you're a Republican running, you know, somewhere in the South that's deep red, you win the Republican primary, you're probably going to win the general. The problem has become that there's this huge incentive to just go so extreme during the primary, and then the most extreme candidates are winning the primary, and then they're the candidates that are then, you know, on the ballot in the general. I think we actually saw, though, in 2020, a lot of people reject these kind of more extreme candidates. But I think, again, it comes down to the fact that I think our system is just designed to lift those kinds of people up. And I think we need to change the way the system is designed a little bit to create more incentives for people and help lift up more voices with maybe more moderate perspectives and positions. I think with a ranked choice system, you rank the different candidates that this is my first choice, this is my second choice, this is my third, and it creates a system where the most extreme person's not just going to be the automatic winner. It actually will create a way for other people to win.
Any chance that we do that? Is there any talk about that?
There's talk about it, and there's like some states that are exploring it, but we do not seem to be very far along. Like I think it would be a state by state change that would have to happen.
Okay.
You could imagine that there are some states that are probably going to be more excited about this than others. I don't think we're anywhere near adopting this like in a widespread way.
Okay.
But there's a few places that have adopted it where it has produced interesting results. Like I think Alaska is one example where ranked choice voting is a thing, and they recently elected a new congresswoman, Mary Pizzola, who's super interesting. And I think that there are some ideas there that we could implement elsewhere that I think would fix some of these incentives. There's a bunch so Andrew Yang.
Yeah.
I mean, he started
New York, right?
Yeah. So he's in New York. He started I don't agree with a lot of what he says, but I think there are some things that he says that are interesting. He's a smart guy. And I at least always listen to what he says, but he talks about this issue all the time. We need to change the way we vote, because that will change the kind of candidates that are able to, you know, get elected and enable actually people who are a little bit more moderate and a little bit less extreme.
And is he talking about rank choice voting as one of those things?
That's one of the potential solutions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, can you explain, because you're in tech now and politics also, with all of the technology that exists now, I mean, we can make our car drive around just from our phone. Why do we still have to? Why can't we vote on our phone?
I don't know. That's a good question.
I mean, surely we can bank on our phone. I mean, you can log in and bank on your phone. You could lose thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars if you didn't do that right. Surely there's a way we can vote on our phone, right? Because I guess if we want to go down to the voting station and stand in lines, fine. And mailing it is fine, but it seems like the mailing it piece, I mean, we don't mail checks to each other that much anymore. You know, you just pay by credit card.
Yeah.
Is there not an electronic way we can vote? Is there any discussions around that, or is this one of those things where one party feels one way and the other feels the other? And like, is there an incentive for one party or another to not vote on our phones?
I mean, the more people that vote, the better. So I hope we get to a place where that's possible. It's hard to see how we get there from where we are currently.
Because one party doesn't want to do that, or why?
Because I think people. I think the right, in some cases, explicitly or implicitly has, they want they want a certain group of people to vote, to be able to vote, and not others. I think if you move voting to phones, for example, it opens up the door for a lot more people to vote, and it's a lot of the people who the right do not want to be voting, because they know that they're not going to receive a lot of those votes.
Yeah. So in other words, the right wants it to be harder to vote.
Correct.
And because they're hoping it'll weed out some of the people that they perceive are not going to vote for them.
I don't think they would ever. They're not. Most of them are not going to tell you that directly, but yes, I think that is true.
Okay. Yep.
And then there's also, there's also the issues of like election security and fraud and everything. Like which you do want to make sure that the person voting is the person who they say they are, and right, it's a lot easier to do when somebody's in person and showing up. And but fortunately, election fraud is actually very uncommon, despite what a lot of people say and are talking about. Our elections are generally pretty secure, and fraud is pretty rare. So I think you would have to design a system that helps continue to ensure that. And I know there's a lot of people who care very deeply about helping making sure that our elections are secure. You could imagine if people don't trust the results when it's on paper, imagine how they're going to feel when it's all on their smartphone.
Yeah, well, that seems way more secure to me. Like showing up at a voting booth, even that. I mean, it's just, I guess maybe I'm revealing my age or whatever. It just feels to me like it's hard to beat the security of a phone. But, I guess not everyone has a smartphone, but most do now, don't they?
Yeah.
Most
I mean,
do.
I hope that, that there's a way that we get there.
It seems like showing up at the voting booth, fairly secure, probably mailing it, I don't know. I don't know how they do. That seems like maybe would be less secure than just going full digital. But, with all of the ways we can secure things digital, it just seems like, good grief, it's 2023 and we still have to walk down the street to vote. Like, it just seems really antiquated.
Yeah. I mean, I totally agree.
All right, last political question, getting your viewpoint from the left. What was your perspective of COVID and in particular Fauci? It seems like when we got into COVID a little bit, the left in particular really seemed to like Fauci, support everything he was saying and all of that. There didn't seem to be much, I don't know. I guess actually this may be correct, but it seemed to me like there wasn't a lot of critical thinking around. It was like whatever Fauci said, all right, now we do.
Yeah.
Is that your perspective also? Is it an unfair assessment? It seemed like maybe the left was more on board with Fauci than the right. And I'm talking about like the back half of the pandemic, not really the first half. Is that a fair assessment? What was your perspective of that?
I think that's fair. I even count myself as someone who's like generally supportive of Fauci, even though I know there's also been things that he's said that haven't been right. So like, I think my default is supportive, but not all the time. And I think that's probably true for a lot of people on the left. I think it is definitely true that a lot, we could do a better job of thinking about things critically. I think especially early in the pandemic, when there was a lot of mixed messages and when there was a lot of things said that turned out to not be right, but they were said with such conviction. I don't know. It seemed like there was just a lack of trust between the people communicating like Fauci and then, the constituents, us, the people in the country. Like it seems like they didn't trust us, and so they were trying to make things simpler, easier to understand. But in doing that, it kind of dumbed things down and made it not totally right or true.
Right.
And so I think that there were plenty of mistakes made where like Fauci and others could have just been communicating more honestly and giving a lot more of the nuance and the context instead of trying to just make things like super simple.
Yeah.
So
I
think it's mixed.
Yeah, and even beyond super simple, it started to feel like they were pushing a narrative, like they were trying to get a certain result, and so they would say whatever they would need to say to get this result. It was like, well, this is different than making it simple. Now it seems like you're pushing a narrative. There was a point, and actually it's maybe still some, but there was a definite point about like, I don't know, like on the back half of, we say back half, look, there's still like, if you want to call it a pandemic, it's still happening.
Yeah, right.
I mean, you know what I mean? Like it's,
Yeah.
we talk about
Ongoing.
this like it's over, but there's still plenty of people getting and dying from COVID now.
Yeah.
But through, I guess, what most of us would perceive as like the worst of it, maybe there was a point in there, like 3/4 of the way in, where it's like it kind of felt like you could tell who was watching what news stations.
Right.
You know what I mean?
For sure.
Like just how they were in public, particularly I think mask related. It was like you could kind of just tell like who was watching a lot of news and which stations they were watching. It seemed like, which seems real. It seems weird. That seems weird. Like if there's that much at stake, it's like, man, if we make COVID political, like, then we're just going to make everything.
Yeah, and
you know?
the one fortunate thing I guess about COVID is that like it was, I mean, not mild. Lots of people have died from COVID, but it could have been
way worse.
So much worse,
Way worse.
and it makes me very scared for the next challenge like this that we face. Because what if it is worse?
Yes, I totally agree. We did not handle that
No.
whole thing very
and I don't
well
think
at
I
all.
don't know that we've like learned or implemented any real lessons that we're gonna like put into practice for next time. And
I know that is the weird part. That is the scary part.
Seems like we're just kind of forging ahead.
We're just moving on.
Yeah.
Yep. We're just moving on, and yeah, that does seem unfortunate. Did you see the movie Triangle of Sadness?
I have not. No.
You can rent it on Apple TV,
Okay.
and it is. You should watch it.
Okay.
It's like 2 hours and 20 minutes long, but it's the type of movie that, while it's not super fast paced, it like really tells a narrative really well and keeps you engaged. And I won't spoil anything, but there's a scene where they're out on this cruise ship and it's in a storm, and the ship eventually wrecks, but they're so caught up in their lavish lifestyle that they're like at dinner, and this is like going to be the captain's dinner, and the captain's locked himself away in his room and he's drunk for the entire trip, but he's the captain of the ship, and he comes to the captain's dinner and he's definitely drunk, and everyone's at their tables. It's very high end. It's like this really nice dinner, and like the ship is rocking, and like there's wine glasses rolling across the floor, and everyone wants to pretend it's not happening. They just keep eating their dinner and smiling and pretending everything's okay, and eventually the ship wrecks.
Yeah.
And they're like, it's like, guys, wake up.
Yeah.
The ship is about
Do you
to
see what's
wreck.
happening outside?
You see what's
Yeah.
happening, and you're still just eating and drinking. It kind of feels like that's where we're at right now in America. It feels like the ship is rocking and everyone just keeps eating and drinking. Surely it's going to be okay. It's going to be fine. Let's keep distracting ourselves and keep focused. I don't know if it's that bad or not, but sometimes it feels like it is.
I think it is that bad, unfortunately. Yeah. I mean, I think the one thing that's making me feel better is that I was encouraged by the fact in our most recent elections, a lot of the candidates with the most extreme views, a lot of the like QAnon adjacent stuff that we were talking about, a lot of those candidates lost.
Exactly.
The people who were like flat out denying the results of the 2020 election, at least the majority of our country kind of saw through that and I think rolled their eyes a little bit and voted for the less extreme person. And I think that's the one thing that's making me think that there's a chance that we sort of pull out of this, that the sort of like, we're able to like stop eating and realize that we're in this ship that's rocking really hard and actually do something about it. But I don't know. It is scary.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. What do you make of love? Like, what do you think, this may sound like a weird question, but what do you think is the role of love in the human experience? When you talk about the things that you value as a person earlier, what's behind that for you? Is it love? Is it equality? What's there? Like, what's the core value there that's like causing you to not want to get on board at all with someone who's racist or misogynist or, anything like that?
My whole life, I've always been someone who's taken an approach of like, work hard, be nice, do the right thing, be a good person. And like, I think that's still how I kind of try and carry myself today. And I think that's the other things I said earlier are just an extension of that.
Yeah.
And I think love is just an extension of that too. When you find your person who shares those values and who improves your life, like I think that's how love kind of starts and builds over time.
Yeah, I think I've asked this question a couple times because I think it's like love is so central to the human experience that it's like it goes unnoticed.
Yeah.
Like it's so core to everything that's good that it can go unnoticed a lot. But yeah, I love that idea of like working hard, be a good person, help others, focus on what you can control.
And the other stuff lines up. The other stuff falls. Like if you get if you get those basics right, a lot of the other stuff kind of falls into place.
Yes. Yeah, I totally agree.
Like I've never been someone who's chased like a title or a salary or notoriety. Like I really do just focus on like doing good work, like treating people well, and then like the sort of the salary and the other stuff, it tends to follow.
Yes, I 100% agree. 100% agree. How old are you?
33.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that just keep doing that, man. Just keep doing that. I mean, I'm not that much further ahead of you. I'm 38, but that resonates so much, and that's so true. And I think more people could probably stand to have that approach. Because, so would you say you're more focused on than like systems and habits and process than goals? Would you say?
Yeah, yes, though I have plenty of goals, but they tend to be like a little bit shorter term, right? Like I don't have a 10-year plan that I'm working backwards from.
But you do.
I know what I'm doing over the next year and what I'm chasing right now.
Yep.
And over the next 2 or 3, maybe even 2 or 3 years. Beyond that, who knows? It'll fall, but I know that it'll fall into place because I'll keep doing, starting with those values. But yeah, I think it's like do good work in the right, in the moment, and the other stuff,
100%
the other stuff
agree.
follows.
100% agree. I think if you can control daily habits. Focus on like the process, the system you set up in your life. I think that just serves people way better than having this school and then this school and then this school and this,
Totally. And like goals are achieved by taking very small incremental steps every single day, or just by doing the same thing every single day, right? You're not going to put a goal for a year from now on your calendar and then suddenly just achieve it. What you're actually going to do is, what are your sub goals for each day leading up to that?
Yep.
That's going to produce the result that you want.
Yep.
I'm a huge believer in sort of daily habits and routines and practices that sort of that set you up and drive towards those right things.
Well, what are some of the daily habits and routines that you have that you think are most helpful?
I'm sure you can appreciate. I like to get some sort of physical exercise or activity every single day, no matter what.
Including Saturdays and Sundays?
Including Saturdays and Sundays.
Okay.
But I'm pretty flexible in how I define that.
Okay.
So it could be going into the gym. Could be going on for a long walk with my wife and with the dog. Could be riding the bike. Could be going for a jog or a run. It varies. Could be doing some yoga. But every single day, I'm moving and I'm sweating. And that's like sort of a habit that I kind of hold true for myself always.
So even if you're going to go on a long walk, are you running at some point to try to work up a little bit of a sweat then, or you just call it good with a long walk?
Maybe once a week I'll allow myself to call it good with a long walk.
Okay.
If that's like kind of my recovery day,
sure,
the long walk counts.
Okay.
But there's some sort of I do some sort of activity or movement every day.
Okay.
pretty much no matter what. Do my best. Sleep is super important. I do my best to sleep 8-9 hours every single night, to the best of my ability. Luckily, I don't have any kids, so that's still still doable for me. That could change at some point. But
what are the hours when do you
least,
try to go to sleep and when do you get up?
I am generally kind of winding down by like 9:30, and then I'm usually probably asleep by like 10:30.
Okay.
And I get up 6:30 to 7.
Okay. Yep.
Depending on the day. So exercise, sleep. When I get up in the morning, I try and not keep my phone. Some of these are a little bit less. I realize I'm getting away from like, goals and more so just like daily habits. These are more just like daily habits.
No, I'm after the daily habits and routines. That's exactly what I'm after.
Yeah, gotcha. So sleep, exercise, my phone. We're all addicted to our phones. I'm trying to become less addicted to it, and one of the ways I'm doing that is I no longer keep it in my bedroom. So So I don't want to be, checking my phone before I fall asleep, and I also don't want it to be the first thing that I look at when I get up in the morning. So keep it in the other room. No screen time late at night, and no screen time first thing in the morning.
And when it's in the other room, so do you have an alarm clock in your bedroom then?
I do on my watch. So I wear my watch, and
Okay.
that serves as my alarm.
Do you wear it to sleep?
Yeah, because I track my sleep with the watch.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. And you're not worried about that bleeding some cancer into your wrist eventually?
I'll deal with that problem when it happens.
Pills for
but
that.
Yeah. Hopefully we've figured it out by then.
Yeah, no, I'm sure it's all good. I just think of that with people that wear. First of all, I can't even wear a wedding ring. Like I can't have stuff on my wrists and fingers because it bothers me. I fidget with it. And but I've always wondered, like with people that wear the Whoops and all those.
I'm hooked on this. The sleep tracking is great because it. You know how much you slept. You know whether or not it was like high quality.
Okay.
And then when you really get into it, you can start to tinker and say, oh, if I don't use my phone, for example, for 30 minutes before bed, how does that impact the quality of my sleep? And you can actually see.
Oh, so it's that detailed? Because so now you're speaking about something that I never fully understood, which was what do people do with the data?
Oh yeah. I mean, I will regularly change, play with or tinker with my habits and then look to see how it impacts my
You think
sleep
it's that
performance.
accurate?
No, it's probably not that accurate, but it at least is consistent. It's like all fitness,
Okay.
like with the
Okay.
Whoop, right? It's,
Sure.
It's not accurate, but it's consistent.
Consistent? That's
So
all
which
you
is the important thing. So
Exactly.
yeah, and then if it's like consistently better, then it is
Sure.
it is better.
Yep.
Even if the data itself is not totally accurate. Yeah.
Oh,
So
hey, what do you? Okay, the phone's in the other room. What about like emergency calls? Do you ever worry about that? Do you just leave your ringer on? If someone does call you, will you hear it?
I would be able to hear it,
You
I
would?
think,
Okay.
and then also because I'm wearing the watch would also
okay.
would alert me.
Gotcha.
First thing in the morning, I do stretching or yoga. So I've been doing Ramwad. Now it's called Pliability. I'm a big fan.
Ramwad is now called Pliability?
They've rebranded. It's now called Pliability.
Really? I used to use Ramwad.
It's great. I still use it every single day, and it's got. You should try it again because it's gotten a lot better recently.
Okay.
They've come out with a bunch of new videos.
Are you doing the stretch of the day, which sometimes like 40 minutes, or what are you doing?
I typically, if it's a 40-minute one, I will typically shorten it to 20 minutes. The 40 ones can be tough for me, just like timing wise. But every day, I'm doing 20 minutes of stretching mobility.
How soon after you wake up?
I will typically probably within 30 to 40 minutes.
Okay.
I get up, take a quick shower, I make a cup of coffee, and then I settle in for some stretching.
Okay.
So it probably takes me 30 minutes to get to that.
And you stretch every day or 5 days a week?
Probably good I strive for every day. I'm probably good for 6 of the 7 days a week.
Okay.
So I'm pretty good.
That's a lot. That's very good.
And if I miss one, what I will do is I will kind of make up for it the next day. I'll do a double session the next day.
Really? And why are you doing this? So that you don't get injured at CrossFit, or because of the way it makes you feel? Why are you?
Both. It feels good. I like it's sort of a calm and peaceful way to start the day.
Mm-hmm.
It feels really good. It helps me feel and move better in the gym.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, all of the above.
Yep. Okay. All right. What else are you doing?
So let's see. So daily exercise. I actually wrote these down, so I should
Yes.
consult my notes here. I know. So I feel like we talked about this before. You mentioned, I think, that you liked the Tim Ferriss podcast, and what I like about the Tim Ferriss podcast is how specific it is, and how you actually get to hear from people. What are the strategies and tactics that you use to optimize your performance and manage your life?
100%. And just shout out for the Tim Ferriss podcast. That podcast is the longest. Listen, I have listened to that podcast longer than any other podcast.
Yeah, well, he's been around. He's been around forever.
Yes,
doing that.
Yeah, and he's still good, man. He's still got great stuff.
Yeah. Let's see here. I think those are the main ones. Like, those are the ones that I'm trying to do every single day.
Mm-hmm. Well, what else is on the list? Because you're looking at a couple that you're not saying. I can tell from here.
Eat clean is on the list, but no one is 100%. I'm certainly not 100% proficient at that.
Yep.
The sort of best balance that I have found is I do my best to eat clean during the week.
Okay.
And then on the weekends I let it slide a little bit, and I if we go out to dinner, I'll eat whatever I want on the weekend.
Okay.
But during the week I try and be more disciplined about it.
Yep. So when you say let it slide a little bit on the weekend, like you're going to get dessert, or you might have pizza, or what are we talking about here?
Could be either or both.
Okay.
Yeah.
But not eating like a whole plate of brownies.
No, I don't take it to extremes. But like if we go out, we might go out and have, I might have a couple slices of pizza.
Okay.
I might order dessert at dinner.
Yep.
Those are definitely possible.
But during,
I might have a cocktail, if we're going out and having a good time.
Splurging, man.
Yeah.
How about during the week when you say eat clean? What are you eating? Because can I just say it right now? For those that are listening that wouldn't know, you are one ripped dude.
Oh no,
man.
you're gonna make me turn red.
No, you don't. You can turn whatever color you want, but dude, you are lean. I mean, you must have good genetics for one. I have to imagine.
I think I'm lucky. Is a big part of it.
I have to imagine you don't look that way just because of the way you eat. So you must have decent genetics, but also, I also have to imagine you don't look that way just from genetics either. So, for anyone who's interested in looking like a bad dude, listen to what this guy's eating because it is working for you. I mean, yeah, you look great, dude.
Well, thank you.
Really good.
I appreciate that. I think it's the CrossFit is the main thing.
Okay.
That drives that, but food is obviously a big part of it too.
Mm-hmm.
I really just try and optimize for like clean ingredients, right?
Okay.
Protein, vegetables, fruits, vegetables, not too much of it. The basics.
And you're just looking for stuff that's like real food, clean, not a lot of preservatives.
Yeah. What's the CrossFit saying?
Stuff?
It's like real food, not too much, mostly plants, I think is
okay.
I think, or maybe that's Ben Bergeron.
Oh,
quote, who I'm a fan. He's the CompTrain guy. He's got a great podcast too that you might enjoy called Chasing Excellence that I really like.
Well, you're talking about Bergeron Strength, the older dude?
That's a different person.
Oh, okay.
That's a different person.
Okay.
Ben Bergeron is the CrossFit New England, and
Okay.
he coaches a few like CrossFit Games athletes, and then he runs the CompTrain like athlete program.
Okay.
But his thing that I think this is his quote. I might be misremembering, but he says, "Real food, not too much, mostly plants."
Interesting. So, do you eat mostly plants?
No.
Okay.
But like I try and maximize the number of plants that I'm eating.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Because I eat plenty of, meat and other things. But,
Okay.
But basically, you should eat an unlimited amount of mostly plants.
Yeah.
If that kind of makes like as much as you can sort of realistically tolerate.
Yep. Do you have breakfast, lunch, and dinner?
I sort of eat whenever I'm hungry, which
Okay.
typically means that I skip breakfast because I'm typically not hungry for breakfast. So that morning cup of coffee that I mentioned, that's usually all I'm having in the morning.
Okay. And so if you go to the gym at 9:30, you've just had coffee.
Coffee, and that's it.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
I like to work out on an empty stomach.
Yep. I'm the same way. So I typically, there's no lunch or no breakfast for me. And then if I'm back from the gym mid-morning, I might make some sort of shake or something to eat.
Okay.
So then I'll start eating.
Do you have a protein shake after the gym?
Yeah, I'll usually make like a smoothie that has protein powder in it.
Okay.
So if that counts as a protein shake, then yes.
So you have a smoothie, and then what are you having later on for lunch?
Lunch is often whatever we made the night before,
Okay.
just as like leftovers. It's often but we make a lot of the same things often, right? Like that's part of what makes this, I think, what makes it feasible to actually eat clean during the week is like find a bunch of recipes that you really like.
Yes.
And just make them all the time.
Exactly.
Like-
and I have no trouble eating the same thing every day, dude. If
I'm the same way.
I have
I'm
no
the same
trouble
way.
with that.
I'm the same way.
Actually
My
kinda
wife,
like
my
it.
wife likes variety a little bit more. So, and for that reason, we switch it up, but within the same sort of sphere or spectrum of things, right?
Okay.
Like, there's some variety, but not a ton.
Okay.
Because it just makes it so much easier.
Yeah, it does. What are you having for dinner then?
We will often make like a big salad with a protein on it, like some chicken or some steak on it, and the salad might change. We will often do bowls, so like a rice bowl with salmon or steak or chicken, and then some sort of like, stir fry or grilled or sautéed vegetable or roasted vegetable with it.
Okay.
So we'll make like Japanese bowls or Greek bowls or Mexican bowls or something like that. That's basically a rice bowl with a protein and some vegetables on it. We do some version of that all the time.
Okay.
What else? We haven't even gone down this rabbit hole yet, but I'm a big fan of like technology and tools and gadgets and like new things to try out around the house. One of which that I've gotten into recently is a sous vide machine.
Oh yeah,
I don't know
yeah,
if you're
yeah.
familiar.
Absolutely, we have one.
I love
Yeah.
my sous vide, so
Oh,
I
they
will
make
make
great
steaks.
food.
I make steaks in it all the time.
Oh yeah.
So the sous vide approach is, it goes in the sous vide for an hour, and then I finish it on the grill. I'll sear it on the grill.
Yes. Oh,
so
my
to give it that
goodness,
nice
dude, you know what? I need
crispy.
to try that. Yeah, because what I started to do with steaks is smoke them for an hour to an hour and a half, and then sear them and finish them.
Okay.
And it probably does somewhat the same thing as
Yeah.
putting in the sous vide for an
Yep.
hour, and
Yep.
man, it flavors.
Well, because the sous vide gets it to just the right temperature, and
Yes.
then that grill kind of makes it to the outside texture that you
Yep.
want. That you
Yep.
want.
I saw somebody just do it in a dishwasher. It acts the same way as a sous vide.
You mean they put a steak in a bag
In the
and put it in the
dishwasher.
dishwasher and then turn the dishwasher
Yeah.
on?
Works.
I have actually heard of this. I have heard. You're not crazy. I've heard of that before. I haven't tried this. I haven't tried it myself, but I have heard you can cook in the dishwasher.
That seems crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah,
So yeah, the
okay.
sous vide's been. I don't use it. I mean, I maybe use it a couple times a month, but not
Okay.
not a ton. But I love how easy it sort of makes it
Oh yeah,
to be super precise.
yeah.
What else? What are some of our other like weeknight? So I'll make like just like a grilled salmon and asparagus
Okay.
pretty regularly.
Okay.
A lot of you'll notice the trend in our household is a lot of grilling. Where we use our
Do you
grill
really?
pretty regularly.
Oh yeah. Well, you can make things like regular food, like salmon, even asparagus. It's just so good on the grill.
Yeah.
So doggone
Yep.
good.
Yep.
What
and
time?
it's so easy,
Yeah,
It's just
exactly.
like
Yes.
it's like minimal cleanup. It heats up quick. It
Yep.
just kind of
You have a gas grill.
yeah.
What time are you eating dinner?
We aim for about 7 p.m. typically. Sometimes we wind up eating later than that.
Okay. Between
But,
7 and
but
8 most
I try.
common?
My goal is usually because if your goal is to be asleep by 9:30, 10, you don't want to be eating much later than 7:30 or so. Ideally.
Okay. So you're trying to get, 2 hours
yeah,
in between dinner and sleep?
Ideally.
Okay.
Though, and honestly, the more the better. Like if I'm super full, I have a hard time sleeping. So I
Oh,
try
interesting.
and because of my eating schedule, I'm eating nothing for breakfast. My lunch is usually kind of on the smaller side. I'll have that protein shake, and then maybe I'll have whatever's left over from the night before. And then dinner is when I'm usually kind of going a little bit harder.
Yeah. Yep.
Eating a lot more.
What about snacks? Are you not snacking throughout the day?
I try not to, but like a snack, I might have like a yogurt or something, or maybe a protein bar if I'm hungry.
Okay.
But I try and avoid the just like
Yeah.
the unhealthy. I basically try and keep that stuff out of the house because as soon as it's in the house, it's like it's kind of over. It's kind of over. Like
dude.
you got to set yourself up for success.
100%.
You bring it into the house. If you
Yes.
bring me some good cookies into the house, I'm gonna eat them.
Yeah.
So like I just got to keep them out of the house.
Yes. So do you
Right,
eat-
and then you don't even have to worry about the temptation
exactly.
side of it.
Yes. Do you eat anything after dinner? Do you snack at all then before bed or no?
Sometimes if I'm still hungry, sometimes I might have like an apple and almond butter or something.
Okay.
So sometimes
you'll put almond butter on an apple?
Yeah.
I bet that's good.
It is good.
Do you eat peanut butter?
I typically prefer almond butter, but I'll
okay.
Who's going to say no? I'm not going to say no to peanut butter.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So that's mostly what you eat in a day then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And it's like, again, I pretty much, I don't really follow like a schedule. I kind of just eat when I'm hungry.
Okay.
And I sort of just try and listen to my body.
Yep.
And then respond to that.
Yep.
And so that also means like if I'm eating dinner, as soon as I'm not hungry or as soon as I'm full, I stop eating, like I really try and listen to what your body is telling you.
This is no bull. And I love salads, but green beans, sometimes lettuce, greens. Yeah. Make my stomach hurt.
Yeah.
I hate it. I love salad. I would eat my face off. Something I've heard that some of the plants sometimes release it's their only self-defense. They can release like a little like self-defense sort of chemical or whatever.
Yeah, acid or something.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's what's getting me, but dude, I would just live on meat and greens.
Interesting. Yeah.
Sure, but some of the greens don't make my stomach hurt a little bit.
Yeah. I wonder if there are certain types of greens that
for sure.
Worse than others.
Yeah, like asparagus is pretty much fine. Green beans for sure tend to make me feel a little weird. Some lettuce, kale sometimes. I don't eat quinoa at all. I mean, I like the way it tastes. It just makes me feel weird.
Yeah. I got one more habit and routine for you, and this is one that I'm very much not doing right now, but it's one that I sort of plan to add into the mix on a more regular basis is connect with people in my life on a daily basis, right? So finding more opportunities to just like text an old friend or call an old friend who I've like lost touch with. I really want to push myself to do that more frequently and more regularly.
Try to do that every day, like reach out to
some
someone
version
every
of
day.
that. I mean, even if it's just a quick text to somebody you haven't talked to in a minute.
Yeah.
Some version of that every single day just to like reconnect with more people.
I love that.
I'm someone who, I don't know, especially with the pandemic, I feel like I've just kind of lost touch with a lot of people in my life who had previously brought like so much joy and value to it, and I want to reconnect with them. And so I really want to bring back a better practice of like, just staying in touch with people.
Yeah, I love that so much. For me, it goes in spurts. Like I will just not reach out for a long time, and then some evening I'll just text like 6 people.
Right. Yeah. Yes. I have the same problem. And so what I'm sort of hoping to do is make it just a more of a daily practice where it's just, there's a steady cadence to it.
Yep.
I think that could even mean in-person connecting too. You go grab coffee or a drink or something with somebody. So that's sort of my looking ahead to 2023. That's the one that I'm going to add into the mix.
I love that. One of the things that I've noticed about myself over time is that I am very jealous for my time, which is good. It's probably, it's a good, quote unquote problem to have, but I can take it too far. The good side is that I tend to be very productive.
Yeah.
The bad side is that it's hard for me to just like go get coffee for no reason.
Right.
Someone needs help or I need help. Oh yeah, now we can justify it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
But just to go hang over coffee, it's harder for me to do that. So,
I mean, I'm the same way. Like I'm a very type A person, and like I don't love like small talk and just like chit chat. Like I want to actually talk about like real things and like the conversation we're having here today. So. I hear you, but I think if you sort of define the goal as like, oh, I'm doing this because I'm connecting with people, it makes it a little bit easier to do.
Total sense.
Speaking of other like wellness oriented technology, and going back to the sleep point, have you ever heard of something called the Chili Pad?
I don't think I have.
So this is probably the piece of technology that has, or I shouldn't even say piece of technology, the thing that has improved my sleep the most. has been the chili pad. Evan at the gym was the one who originally told me about it. He also is a big fan and has one. It is a pad that goes on top of your mattress, but underneath your sheets, and it is temperature controlled to the degree from your smartphone, powered by a box that goes under your bed. There's tubes. I think it's water. So the box goes under your bed. It's circulating water through the pad, and then it's temperature controlling the water.
Okay.
Which then almost think of it kind of like a sous vide.
Sure.
You're then lying on top of the pad, and the water is temperature controlling you.
Yeah.
And you can set that thing to whatever temperature makes you sleep your best. I have found that the colder I am, the better I sleep. So I crank that thing all the way down.
Really?
Yes.
Well, how cold does it go?
55.
Whoa.
So it says the number 55 on there. I don't actually feel like I'm 55 degrees at that point, but
how wide is the pad?
You can get it to where it covers the entire bed if you want. I have the one that's the half version, so it only covers half the bed. Because my wife, she doesn't have she likes to sleep a little bit warmer than I do.
Yeah.
So
55 degrees for Mariana would. I don't think she.
Yeah. Well, you
sleep.
you can customize it like with a partner where one side you get two different units.
Oh yeah.
And one side can be one temperature, the other side can be the other.
Okay.
I just have the half the bed version.
Okay.
But you can get a whole bed version too. And man, I'm telling you, it has been a game changer. Just being able to sleep actually at a cold. I was someone who always woke up like with the sweats. That was always a problem for me, and this kicked that.
All right.
And
okay,
it's been huge.
Pause you for a second. When would you wake up with the sweats? Because I've been waking up with some night sweats.
Like all throughout the night, always. And it's still a problem. If I travel and I don't have this thing, it's like I still struggle with that.
Oh, thank God, dude. I was pretty sure I had cancer. Because if you Google night sweats, I don't see it. Most of it's just cancer.
I think it's a pretty
Did
common.
Did you ever Google it?
No, fortunately. So I haven't gone down that hole.
I mean, I spent some time 2-3 weeks ago. I was pretty sure I had Hodgkin's disease, and so I scheduled a blood test, and it's like happening next week. And that's my primary question: is can we make sure I don't have Hodgkin's disease because I have a lot of the symptoms?
Yeah,
and one of them is the night sweats, and I got them in like 2020 for some weird reason, and then they kind of went away. And now in the last month or two, I've been having them more.
Interesting.
And
I wonder, well, that's sort of aligned. So if it's last month or two, that's like just, November, December, January, like kind of the winter months. I wonder if it's some way, maybe the way your temperature is controlled in the house. Like do you have the heat on overnight?
We sleep at the room pretty cool.
Okay.
So I don't think it's that. But yeah, it's weird, man. If you Google the night sweats, like there's not a lot of great reasons, at least on Google, that you should be having the night sweats.
Well, man, of anything I have, any like product that I have purchased over the past 5 years, this is probably the one that has led to the most like just improvement in my day-to-day life has been this.
Oh, wow.
Has been the chili pad.
How much are they?
I want to say it was $750, $800 for the half version. Something like that.
Yeah. Okay.
So
the technology is good, huh?
Fantastic. Yeah.
Okay.
Highly recommended.
Yeah.
Has been a game changer for my sleep and just like how I, feel during the day as a result. So
thanks for mentioning that.
Yeah, that's been a big one.
Check
you can ask Evan all about that one too. I'm sure he'll.
Has he been using it for some time?
He has. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good sleep is so important for physical activity,
100%.
Your mind, just. Dude,
everything, your ability to show up for your family, your ability to be a good communicator, your ability to deal with challenge and adversity. Like if something happens and you're in a car accident or whatever, and it's easier to just kind of take it in stride and deal with it if you are well rested and well functioning. So
100% agree.
I feel like sleep I think it's getting a lot more attention now, but I think it's been so overlooked for so long.
Yeah.
And I think we're just at the cusp of really starting to figure out, how to sleep more effectively and how to optimize our sleep. So I think there's going to be a lot more kind of in that space.
I agree with that. I was listening to Andrew Huberman talk about sleep a little bit. And one of the things he was saying was your growth hormone peaks before midnight. So it's like you can get 9 hours of sleep, but sleeping from midnight to 9 is not as good as sleeping from 9 to 6. So like when you get to sleep also matters. Now, at the end of the day, sleeping from midnight to 9 is probably going to be just fine. But in terms of like habits, daily habits, getting more of your sleep before midnight is good.
That's interesting. That's funny. Well, I also was listening to his podcast recently, and he said something else I can mention in a minute. But that's interesting because when I look at my sleep tracking, my deep sleep is typically in those earlier hours.
Yeah, but I think that's common. I think that's...
It's like the first few hours when I go to sleep is when I'm getting my most productive sleep.
Yeah. Yep. What was the other thing you were going
to mention? So I also heard on his podcast, which totally surprised me. But it's now that I think about it, it makes sense intuitively. Spending 10, 15 minutes out in the sun in the morning has an enormous impact on your sleep the following night.
Yes.
So like you get, for that, and it's I think he actually said it's the most important thing.
That's crazy.
The most important factor that determines how you sleep at night is whether or not first thing in the morning you get like 10 minutes of sunlight. I don't know. I mean,
my understanding is it sets your clock. It starts to, like, this has to do with like the circadian rhythm.
Right.
It like sets the timer on. You get first thing in the morning, you get the sun in your eyes for 10 or 15 minutes, and it sets the timer, and so you're going to be better prepared to go to sleep that night. I don't remember him saying it being the most important thing, but it is something that that one of the things that I do based on that, because this is not as good as sunlight, but it's better than nothing, is getting bright lights on. So as soon as I wake up, I go to the bathroom, I turn the bathroom light on, I turn the light of the mirror over the sink on, I turn the shower light on, I turn the light on over the toilet. Like that entire bathroom is lit up.
Yeah.
And stays lit up, while I shower and everything until I'm out. So I try to do like getting those bright lights immediately, but I don't go out and sit outside in the sun. I did do that a couple years ago for a little stretch, but I have a hard time just sitting there for 10 minutes. I want to get the day started.
My wife's great at it. She uses it as her meditation time in the morning. She'll go out and sit outside just 10 minutes in the sun, even in the winter, which is like crazy. She'll like put on a jacket.
Really?
Just go sit outside in the sun and just
first thing?
Not necessarily first, but kind of when I'm like in that stretch, like within the first 30 minutes, maybe.
Really?
30 or 40 minutes. Yeah.
Okay.
She's very, very disciplined about that. I aspire to be.
Yeah.
So.
Is she doing that for reasons of sleep, or is she just naturally something she gravitated to?
It was the latter. I think she just feels like it feels good. The sleep thing was news to her. I told her about it last week or whenever I heard it, and she was just like, "Oh,
wow, that's
good thing I've been doing this for so long."
But the other thing that Andrew Human was talking about that I started to take care to do is not drink my coffee so early.
Yeah, I've heard him say that, and I'm not good at that one. So
yeah, I've grown into it, because it sounds like you have a really nice morning habit with getting up, coffee, and then stretching. So it's like, man, you might not want to tamper with that, But the science behind it, which makes sense to me, is when you sleep, you have this buildup of whatever it is. It's like GABA or something like this. It's like the buildup of sleepiness. And what happens is when you go out in the sunlight, it spikes your cortisol.
Yeah.
And the cortisol has this other stuff, like it runs that other stuff out of your system, the GABA or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is if you drink coffee, when that stuff is still in there, it mutes it, but it doesn't go out of your system. And then when the caffeine wears off mid-afternoon, that stuff like resurfaces. And so then you can have another cup of coffee and it mutes it. But if you let 60 to 90 minutes go by after you wake up and then drink the coffee, that stuff has worked itself out of the system. Now your system's clear. Now you drink the coffee. And so when the caffeine wears off, the stuff doesn't like resurface again. So that was like the science behind it. And so I have been, I think probably most mornings I'm awake for probably an hour before I drink coffee. I make it into the office and then sometimes a little more, but
it sounds like that's an intentional choice. Like you're trying to reach that 60 to 90 minute threshold.
Oh yeah. Cause when I wake up, dude, I would have that coffee.
I mean, that's my problem. I want it immediately.
Yes.
So
yeah, no doubt.
I'm going to have to give that a shot and see how it feels.
Yeah. But with your stretching routine, see, I got to get back into that because I was stretching Ramwad every day also a couple years ago, and man, it felt really good. I'm sure that there's a direct connection between injuries in the gym and stretching.
I would imagine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like I also, and just in terms of morning routines, I'm not someone who likes to just like get up and like rush through my morning. I like to be kind of like I'll get up earlier if it means I get to have my morning routine.
Oh yeah.
Right? Like if I have something I have to be at 8 a.m.
Yep.
I'm just going to get up a little earlier.
Okay.
So that I can kind of have my slow morning where I stretch.
Okay.
And I still can drink my coffee and maybe read the news a little bit and just have a moment to myself before I'm like thrown into the thick of the day. I'm not someone who can just like get up and out of bed and then I'm right at it right away. I need like a minute to just kind of.
What do you like? An hour,
going.
Hour and a half? What do you like there?
Probably an hour to an hour and a half if I can control it.
Okay.
So have you guys taught kids yet?
Yeah, the hour to an hour and a half. Did
I just out myself as someone who does not have any kids?
Solid
I think so.
3.5 minutes, bro.
Yeah. All that'll. I'm sure all that'll change if and when we decide to have some kids. But for now, it's working great.
Oh
so
yeah. No, that's.
I'll enjoy it while I can.
Yeah, I think I envy that. I envy that little bit. No, it's not kid related. I mean, I could do whatever I want. I mean, I could get up earlier, but I just feel this need to start the day. I don't exactly know why. When I wake up, I just feel like I need to get into the office. I'd rather get in there earlier than leave earlier, but I think that's just a personal preference.
Yeah.
All right, man. Anything else you wanted to cover while you're here?
Let's see.
On any of the fronts?
We hit a lot of really great. I mean, I feel like we hit a lot of great stuff. We really got into the politics. We talked a lot about habits and routines. We talked about some health and wellness tech. We've mentioned a few podcasts that we liked. I listen to a lot of podcasts.
Oh yeah,
I do. It's probably I probably listen to too many. But
how many do you listen to?
I probably am subscribed to, 20 to 25, but I don't listen to them. I subscribe to them all.
Wow.
I consider listening to every episode, but then if like the topic doesn't interest me or the guest doesn't interest me, I will skip past it. So like the Huberman podcast is a great example. I don't often have the patience to listen to a 3-hour podcast, but if it's a topic that really interests me or a guest that really interests me, I'll give it 10 minutes, and if it hooks me, then I'll go for it.
Yep.
So I probably 20 to 25 at any given time. I mentioned the Chasing Excellence podcast, which I think you would really like. That's Ben Bergeron. That's a lot of health, wellness, fitness, and it's also very specific in the sort of Tim Ferriss-esque. It's very tactical.
Yep.
Here are the supplements that you should consider taking if you're someone who does CrossFit type workouts, and here are some sleep habits and routines you should consider adopting. It's like very practical.
Oh, cool.
It's very practical. So I enjoy that one. You're going to notice a trend here. The podcasts that I tend to like, most of the ones that are like are kind of specific in that way. So another one is called Odd Lots. It's from Bloomberg. It's two journalists from Bloomberg, and every week they will go super deep on like a kind of esoteric or niche industry. I think the last episode I listened to was all about the trucking industry. They actually interviewed a trucker. They brought a trucker on the podcast to just talk about like all the challenges and opportunities that are true and all of it's just a total surprise to me as someone who has no idea what's happening, what it's like to be a trucker or what's happening in the trucking space. And so it's just really interesting to hear somebody else's perspective.
Are they journalists or who's?
They are. The two Bloomberg people are journalists.
Oh, cool.
But every 1 week it'll be trucking. The next week it'll be like shipping and supply chain. The next week it'll be crypto.
Okay.
There's usually like a finance angle to it, but it gets very into the weeds of like the supply chain and how our economy like actually works.
Okay, fascinating. Odd Lots.
It's great, and it like goes super. On every episode, it like goes deep, and you really learn about the topic that they're talking about, which I feel like a lot of other shows, I tend to not like them because they're just like they try and be too broad.
Yeah, very general.
Or too generic.
Yes, that's dude. That's the one thing I've been thinking about that for this podcast too. Is like I want it to be conversational, but you need to get into the specifics too.
Yes.
You can't just buzz over the top. It's just you can get that anywhere, or it's like that's not helpful.
Yeah, well, it's those follow-up questions that are key. It's like, okay, sleep is important. Okay, now how are you actually achieving that?
Sure.
What are like the tools and strategies that you're using to to actually prioritize and
Yep.
optimize for that? Another one that I love is called 99% Invisible. It's all about, as the title would suggest, things that exist in our everyday world that you wouldn't necessarily see or think about, but that have huge implications on how our kind of world operates.
Ooh, that's a fascinating
So, for example,
premise.
one episode that stands out was all about curb cuts. You know, the cuts in the curb that go down to the pavement so that people in wheelchairs can actually wheel up, can get up onto the curb. It told the whole history of like how those came to be, who proposed them, how they became popular and widespread. It's just like something that you never would really think too much about the history of, but there's a ton of in some cases fraud. Like there used to be no curb cuts anywhere, and people who were living their lives in a wheelchair had a lot of trouble getting up and down off, and getting through our public spaces. And so just a really interesting perspective. Another episode of that podcast that was fantastic was talked about the history of San Francisco and how during the gold rush in the 1800s, ships rushed into the San Francisco harbor, parked, people got off, and went, looking for gold. But then all these ships got left behind later, and then more ships kept coming. Long story short, there was this huge fire, and a lot of the ships sunk to the bottom of the San Francisco Bay, and they eventually filled it in. And so what's happening now is when they're building skyscrapers, and they were building, I think, the Salesforce Tower a few years ago in San Francisco, and they were digging, and they like unearthed some like pieces of an old ship from the 1800s, and it's just like, why is there a ship under land in San Francisco? It's because they filled it all in after all these ships sunk to the bottom of the harbor.
And that's the 99% invisible one also.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's just it's stories about hidden things in our everyday world that you might not necessarily see. Just super interesting. The other one that I love is called Switched on Pop, more music oriented. I'm not a big, I don't listen to a ton of like new and popular music, but what they will do is they will look at like new and popular music and trace its roots.
Okay.
Like what are the songs from the 60s, 70s, 80s that like where you can hear elements of that music in this new song, and like how do you sort of trace it back through time and through history?
Yep.
What are like the sort of musical like techniques that are still present in today's music in 2023 that you could go back to a song from the 70s and they'll like play them side by side and like show it to you, which is really cool.
That is cool. How do you listen to all these podcasts? I mean, we've only covered 4 of them. You have 20 or 25?
I skip a lot of them, inevitably.
Okay.
Is how it works out.
When do you listen to podcasts?
Chores, around the house, walking the dog, sometimes exercise. Not at the gym, obviously. But if I'm just gonna like ride the bike at home or something, or maybe I'm like go for a jog, if it's like a little bit lower intensity, I'll listen to a podcast. But I don't know. I think it's just in a lot of those like in between times. I work from home, so it's just like I'm going into the kitchen to make lunch. Yeah, and I'll pop in a podcast and listen to a quick episode.
Yep. But you don't listen to podcasts when you're working?
No, because I do not, because I find it very hard to both listen and do something else.
I can't.
So
I cannot concentrate on 2 things at once. It's impossible.
But I am a big fan of. We have music in our house playing pretty much all the time. And we'll have like, some background. I like to listen to like music while I'm working. Okay. So I'll have some music playing.
Yes,
typically.
Same. What do you like to listen to?
I'm all over the place. Some indie rock.
Looking for some new ideas. Who would you suggest?
The band that I with my music listening habits, I like go really deep on like one group in particular for like a few months at a time.
Yeah, that's what
you know, like I listen to the same thing for like a few months, and then I just pivot to something else.
Yeah.
Right now, it's a group called Khruangbin, spelled KHRUANGBIN, I think is how it's spelled. Okay. And they're from Texas. They're a trio. There's 3 of them. They're this kind of like down tempo, like indie rock group. Okay. And it's super unique. I don't even know what I would compare it to. Okay. But it's
I'll check them out.
It's great.
Yeah, I'm often looking for like new music ideas. I have a note on my phone where I just like, if I hear of
something that you like,
I'll jot it down, or someone mentions something, I'll jot it down.
They're fantastic. I'm a big fan. Do you know who Leon Bridges is?
Oh, heck yeah.
So I wasn't. I love Leon. I also love
man.
Leon Bridges. They've done a bunch of songs. He's done a bunch of songs with Khruangbin. That's actually that's how I found out about them.
Oh yeah.
They've done a bunch of songs together. Now I've gone, super deep.
Okay, I'll check it out. So Leon Bridges is ridiculously smooth, man. Yes. And what's cool is you just follow him on Instagram, and he's just like it's a holistic vibe. Yeah, just who his music is, just who he is as a person. Yep, it's what it seems like on at least just following him on Instagram anyway. Yeah, he's I love his stuff.
He's extremely talented.
Yeah. All right. Any other podcasts you want to mention right away?
I think I hit the ones that I thought you might be most interested in.
Cool. I jotted them down.
I've got one more.
Yep.
If Books Could Kill.
Okay.
This one's relatively new. Each episode is about a book that became very popular, but that potentially has some ideas in it that might be problematic. When I was in high school, this was around the time of the Freakonomics book, and I think I took AP Economics in high school, and the teacher prescribed Freakonomics as like one of the required reading, and I fell in love with it. That was actually what prompted me to major in economics when I went to college. Oh, wow. Yeah, was that I would probably cite that book as high up. It was what got me interested in the topic to begin with. But it was super interesting to later find out that there's just potentially some like kind of cherry picked statistics and methodology in the book.
That seems like, if that's the premise of that podcast, that seems like you could probably dismantle everything and anything.
Yeah. Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
But I guess at some point, you just got to know what call it good enough.
Yeah.
But that's fascinating. So is that what it does with all of its episodes?
Each episode is a book. It's a book that became popular, and it's like, here is something you might want to think a little bit more about.
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
And they've done books as recent as I think Freakonomics was mid 2000s. But then some of the books they've talked about have been from like the 70s and 80s too. So it's been a range of stuff, but super interesting.
Aside from podcasts, do you have any other notes over there you want to share right away? I love that you had some notes, man. I don't want to miss anything good over there. All this stuff's so great.
Oh yes, I do. So I was in preparing to come in here for this today. I listened to a few of your back episodes, and I was listening to. I think it was the episode you did with the Proven guys, which was super interesting. It was great.
Yeah, Dwight Upshaw and Nick Johnson.
Yeah, I didn't know about them. I didn't really. I know of Proven, but I didn't know about those guys, and that was a great conversation.
Yeah.
I can't remember if it was you or them, or I can't even remember if this was the place where I heard this, but I heard something that has stuck with me. So we're both people who enjoy CrossFit, high intensity fitness.
Yep.
And you said, I heard something on that episode that made me realize why I like it so much, which is that you're both competing against yourself and against your friends at the same time.
Yes, 100%.
And I don't think I had never conceptualized it that way in my head. Yeah. And when I heard that, I was like, that is that now it makes it like, yes. You're chasing your own goals, but you're also having fun and kicking it with your friends and trying to beat them too.
Yep.
And to be able to do those two things at the same time, it's really unique to CrossFit. And it made me realize I think that's actually the thing that I really enjoy about it.
Yes, because there's a lot baked into that. Like, to compete with others, you have to know where their skill set is. You have to kind of know them a little bit,
Yep.
and so there's a community element baked in there that's just assumed if you're competing with others. But the competing against yourself thing, I think, is really like if I have given other like newcomers to the gym, if they ask or whatever, my advice for CrossFit is show up and use what you got.
Yeah.
Because it varies. I mean, some days you're like, whoa, did pretty good. And other days there's nothing there.
Right.
So just show up, use what you got. Like, don't try to force anything. That's when injuries happen. But I think for the people who are naturally just competitive, because I'm definitely that way, it's like I try to like know when I cannot compete with other people because I'm going to hurt myself.
Right.
So you just need to know, like, and on those days, just compete against yourself, But yeah, I totally agree. Those two things, competing with others and yourself.
Yeah. And I had never thought about it that way. And it made sense. Like, this is why. Because it's like you can constantly strive for better, right? Like CrossFit is something that's like easy to learn, hard to master in some ways, right? Like you can get into it kind of easy. There's a very low barrier to entry. But then you're never done. You're constantly working on it and trying to improve and be better. And I think that's kind of what hooked me into it. And I think that's what means I'm going to be doing it for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. Me too.
Hopefully, knock on wood.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Dude, I recently tried jiu-jitsu for the first time ever. And I quit this past week because I can't. I knew going in that if it messes with CrossFit, I'm gonna have to stop. And I have enough of injuries already with just CrossFit. Something about CrossFit and jiu-jitsu, like the risk of injury is greater at CrossFit, at least in the very short time I experienced jiu-jitsu. Risk of injury for me was greater at CrossFit than jiu-jitsu, but there was still a risk of injury at jiu-jitsu. And in the 2 to 3 months that I did jiu-jitsu, I was only able to go about half of the time. I mean, also time was an issue because if you're going to do it, you may as well do it right. And I'm not going to like sacrifice going to the gym. I want to go 5 days a week, but I can't make it in on Tuesdays right now. So I go 4 days a week. So, it takes an hour and a half by the time you get there, work out for an hour, shower, and get back home. I mean, that's an hour and a half of your day. Yeah. And then to do another hour and a half thing in your day, that's 3 hours, 3.25 hours of your day. It's like it was too much. But I quit because of injury, and I just don't want to have anything tamper with CrossFit. I like the people. I like I kind of look forward to it in a sick way. It's never a burden to go to the gym, and I just don't want to mess with. I don't want to mess with that. So
I mean, I've made some of my closest friends I've made through the gym and through the community there. Yeah. It's been great. I think that's part of what has hooked me into it too. Yeah, exactly. Just around really good, driven people, trying to be a little bit better every day. There's something pretty powerful about that.
For sure. All right, Lee. Well, thanks for coming on the podcast, man. I appreciate your time.
This has been a ton of fun.
Yeah, and
thank you for having me.
Yeah, this has been a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. And also, thanks for trusting me because, I mentioned this when I reached out to you, but I really was looking for your perspective from the left. And I wasn't trying to, make it hard for you or come up with hard questions or gotchas or any of that. And I assume, that took a little bit of trust on your end. So
totally. And I think that, absolutely. And I think part of the way we get out of this mess that we're in is just by having more open and honest conversations. Yeah. Where we actually do listen to each other and talk to each other and hear each other out and try to come to some sort of mutual understanding, even if we can't agree on everything, it's like, I think these kinds of conversations are just too few and far between.
Yeah. Well, I think it speaks to the importance of having diversity in your life because, I wouldn't have had you on here if we weren't at the same gym because I wouldn't have known you. But also, I mean, I told you this in the text is I perceive you as smart, driven, clear-minded, a good communicator. Even wise, like in a sense. So if you're like have aligned yourself with the Democratic Party, I want to know more about that. Yeah. You know what I mean? I can't write you off as like, well, that's just a far left kind of crazy person. Like I can't do that because I know you. So that's the importance of having diversity in your life.
Totally.
So
yeah,
wherever it makes sense to get that, you know. Churches should have a lot more of that, I think. But gyms, whatever makes, you know, have friends from different walks of life and different experiences.
It's super important. Yeah,
it is actually really important. And I think that is
too many people just live in a bubble with
for sure. But I also think that in a city you have at least the opportunity for that. Whereas if you live way out in the country, there's less opportunity for that.
Totally.
So, all right, Lee. Thanks again, man.
Thanks, Kent. Appreciate it,
everybody.
Catch me howling at the moon.